Chapter 333. At the same time, 10 shooting stars appeared in Western Sea Clan. These shooting stars that came from Sky Mist City told Freezing Sky Clan and Western Sea Clan that they had to prepare themselves for the worst. During the final night before the battle was brought forward, compared to the silence in the mountains, the sky within Freezing Sky Clan was filled with booming sounds. Those booming sounds came from a movement of the 9 continents in Heaven Gate. To many people, this was a sleepless night. When the sky outside became slightly brighter and the first rays of sunlight appeared in the morning, many people wanted to leave this land and head toward Sky Mist. Perhaps what awaited them would be glory, or perhaps they would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, or perhaps they would die in a foreign land. That night, they could not sleep. Even if they were training, there were still quite a number of people who found it hard to calm their hearts. Some of them stared at the night sky in a daze. Some polished their enchanted vessels. Some held their families' belongings and prayed. The rumbling sounds continued to come from outside. The movement of the gate of heaven and the dislocation of the 9 continents gradually formed a dispersing pattern. In the middle of the pattern, there was a distortion in the dark night. Occasionally, there would be lightning flowing through it, as if it had formed a mirror. The main killing treasure of the 3 great treasures would slowly descend from it. Su Ming walked out of his cave abode at midnight. The booming sounds by his ears grew stronger. In fact, when he lifted his head, he could vaguely see the shape of Heaven Gate's 9 continents in the night sky. He could see an indistinct object swimming in the middle of the lightning arcs, and it looked as if it had come from another world. Su Ming stood there for a long time. His shadow under the moonlight was filled with a strange air. He averted his gaze, turned around, and walked towards the top of the mountain. As he stepped on the 9th summit's ice, a reluctance to part appeared in his eyes. He knew that he did not know when he would be able to return after leaving the next morning. Perhaps he would not be able to return at all, but there were certain things he had to do. Only in war could he grow quickly. If he did not dare move forward because of fear, then how could he find his way home? His way home would be much more difficult than this war. However, Su Ming still could not bear to part with the 9th summit. He could not bear to part with a single blade of grass and a single tree. Could not bear to part with Hu Zi's snores. Could not bear to part with his second senior brother's smile. Could not bear to part with his eldest senior brother's silent care, and could not bear to part with his master's occasional crazed actions. He cherished all of this. What he could not bear to part with was the feeling he had when he was in the 9th summit. It was a warm feeling. Even if the weather in this place was cold, the warmth that came from his heart in the midst of the cold made him valued and protected. He really wanted to stay here for the rest of his life. He didn't want to think about everything in Wushan. He didn't want to think about the deep meaning of the word fate. He didn't want to think about the countless years that had passed in the crack. He didn't want to think about the cold gaze and the disappointed words. He really wanted to give up on all these mysteries and stop thinking about them. He wanted to stay in a 9th summit and spend the rest of his life there. However, Su Ming could not accept it. He could not forget Dark Mountain. He could not forget everything. Su Ming remained silent as he walked up the 9th summit. When he reached the top, he looked at the dust-covered hall and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards it. Su Ming would like to see Master. His voice echoed out, but it was drowned out by the rumbling in the sky, carried away by the cold wind that blew in from all directions, as if it couldn't exist in this place. Su Ming bowed down and did not move. Time trickled by. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, a sigh came from beside Su Ming. Your 3rd senior brother isn't going back, your 2nd senior brother isn't going back, and your eldest senior brother isn't going back either. Do you really want to go? Along with the voice came Tian Xiezi, who was dressed in a long blue robe. Su Ming lifted his body and turned his head around to look at Tian Xiezi. There was uncertainty on his face, but it soon turned into determination. I want to go. If I don't even dare to step into the land of the shamans and keep waiting for my power to increase, then there will come a day when I won't dare to walk out of the land of South Morning, even if I reach the Berserker Soul Realm. Because, Master, you said before that even powerful berserkers in the Berserker Soul Realm will face great danger if they want to leave the land of South Morning. The blue-robed Tian Xiezi looked at his disciple before him. After a moment of silence, a melancholic look appeared on his face. This battle is different from the ones before. Perhaps you made the right choice. You can't avoid this battle. Oh well, if you want to go, then go. Perhaps I and your senior brothers will meet you there. Tian Xiezi shook his head and sighed. Su Ming hesitated for a moment before he asked in a low voice, Master, just what happened? Didn't you hear some of it? Tian Xiezi cast Su Ming a glance. Su Ming paused for a moment before he answered slowly, Not all of it. Then that's enough. Knowing too much isn't always a good thing. Tian Xiezi remained silent for a moment before he looked at the dark sky with a complicated look on his face. He lifted his right hand and seized at the air. Immediately, a wooden slip appeared in his hand, and he handed it to Su Ming. You've come to find me because of the old sun maker I took you to see. This is the address of his tribe. Take this item and travel through the frigid ice sky for 3 nights. Then you can leave with this item. That location is the closest to where he is. Tian Xiezi cast Su Ming a deep look, then lifted his head to pat Su Ming's head with a kindly look on his face. Walk down your own path. Just like how I proved to your grandmaster that I was right all those years ago. Prove that your path is more correct than mine. Tian Xiezi walked past Su Ming and into the air before he gradually disappeared. Su Ming stood there and remained silent for a long time. Then he bowed towards a dusty hall and walked down the stairs to his cave abode. He looked at his surroundings in the cave abode. He did not meditate, but looked at everything around him. That familiar, when dawn arrived before the sun even broke the horizon, Su Ming packed his things. He did not take anything from the cave abode and left the place as it was. He believed that he would return to this place a few years later, because this place was also his home. Once he walked out of the cave abode, Su Ming suddenly lifted his right hand and pressed it against the ice wall beside him. He dug out an ice block and put it into his storage bag. This is the sign of the 9th summit. Su Ming stood on the platform and looked at the dark sky. He looked at Heaven Gate. There was a gigantic object that was mostly revealed, but the area around it was distorted and indistinct. He could not see it clearly. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath of the 9th summit's air and walked down the mountain stairs. When the sky started to brighten up, he arrived outside Huzi's cave abode. Snores came from within. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face, and he stepped into Huzi's cave abode. Huzi was sprawled on the ground, snoring loudly. Drool flowed down the corners of his mouth and turned into a puddle on the ground. There were a lot of wine gourds by his side, and some of them had fallen to the side. Su Ming looked at Huzi for a long time before he brought out a gourd filled with wine and left. The sky was slightly brighter, but the ground was still dark. Su Ming saw his second senior brother moving about like a ghost in the mountain. His footsteps faltered for a moment, and the moment he stopped, his second senior brother floated towards him in the darkness. He stopped before Su Ming and looked at him. Second senior brother. Su Ming whispered softly. Youngest junior brother, I suspect that the shamans are the ones who steal my plants every night. Once you get there, remember to help me find out who did it, second senior brother said sternly. Su Ming was momentarily stunned before he smiled wryly and nodded his head. Take this and take care. Second senior brother exuded a chilling presence in the middle of the night. He took a few steps forward and placed something in Su Ming's hand before he floated past him. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at his palm. There was a small black blade of grass there that was shining with a dark light. This thing grows with my phantom aura. It can turn into phantom fog no matter where you place it. When you're tired, you can sleep in it without worry. Second senior brother's chilling voice traveled into his ears from the distance, but Su Ming did not feel cold. There was warmth in his heart. Dawn gradually arrived without his knowledge. The sky was bright, and the darkness on the ground was chased away. Quite a number of people walked out of their cave abodes from the 9 summits and lifted their heads to look at the sky. In the sky, the 9 continents of the Heaven Gate formed a ring, and within the ring, there was a net of lightning. Within the net, there was an object that was 1,000 feet long. It was entirely black and had sharp edges. It looked like a gigantic sword. The part of the sword that was revealed was 1,000 feet long, and its width was 100 feet. It looked like the peak of a mountain. There were also complicated symbols flashing on the surface of the sword. Every single time they flashed, a great pressure would descend on the ground. Booming sounds continued reverberating in the air. Su Ming saw the sword-like object rapidly moving through the net, and as it did so, the booming sounds became even stronger. After a moment, the sun's rays shone on the ground with a piercing light. The sky trembled, and the sword-like object abruptly revealed itself from within Heaven Gate's net. It was a black sword with a length of more than 1,000 feet and a width of 100 feet. It floated in the air and exuded a shocking, killing intent. If that was all there was to it, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, the moment the sword appeared, it began to rapidly expand. In the blink of an eye, it formed a giant shadow on the ground in a shocking manner. That object grew 100 times larger and turned into a gigantic object that was 100,000 feet tall and nearly 10,000 feet wide. It floated in the sky like a gigantic mountain. It looked like a sword, but if anyone took a closer look, they would find that it was a ship. The gigantic shadow on the ground practically enveloped the 9 summits. As the object appeared, a powerful pressure filled the hearts of all those who lifted their heads to look at it. I am Jing Xingrong. I will be leading the team this time. 9 people flew out from the continents of Heaven Gate. All of them were dressed in white. 8 of them sat cross-legged at different corners of the sword. Only one person stood at the tip of the sword and swept his gaze across the land as he spoke languidly. Those who fight step on a frozen sky. Once you arrive, you will be branded. If you die in battle, the brand will disappear. All of you from Freezing Sky Clan, hurry up and join the shaman hunt. I'm sending the second update, asking for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 334. Hurry up and come. Those words stirred up echoes, as if countless people were roaring at the same time. Their voices reverberated through the area. When those voices fell into the ears of those who heard them, they felt as if they could control their minds and stir up an endless amount of fighting spirit within them. In the blink of an eye, a figure flew up from the mountain on the ground and charged towards the frozen sky. The moment he stood on it, a small white dot appeared on the pitch-black sword. That represented life force. Its position would not change. Once it disappeared, it meant that the person had died. Soon after, people charged up and charged towards frozen sky. As more people stood on the sword, the number of white dots increased. An exuberant fighting spirit burst forth from Freezing Sky Clan 20 days ahead of the scheduled time. The Battle of Sky Mist and the hunt for the shamans is the pride of all berserkers. This is the most important battle in our lives. We might die in this battle, but even if we die, we will die for the berserkers. We might not die, but if we don't die, we will be glorious. The voice of the old man, standing at the tip of the sword, reverberated in the air. There was a strange power contained in his voice that made all those who heard excited. More figures whizzed out and headed straight for the ice sky. There were even some figures that came from the continents of the Heaven Gate. Many of the disciples of the Heaven Gate also stepped on the huge sword. We already know that the shamans have moved out ahead of schedule. We saw the shooting stars from Sky Mist. I can tell you this, that's not bad news. To me, that's the signal for war to start. I can tell you this, I've been waiting for this day for 100 years. The old man roared, and his voice reverberated in the air. Even more people roared out, rushing towards frozen sky, standing on it, leaving behind life force imprints on the sword's body. Freezing Sky Clan has been around for less than 10,000 years. But do you know just how many shamans we've killed during these thousands of years? I can tell you this, countless. Freezing Sky Clan started from a weak clan, and we've used killing shamans to prove our power. Now, we're one of the only 2 great clans in the land of South Morning. That's because we will definitely win. The old man's voice reverberated in the air, and more people charged towards him. At that moment, There were already thousands of Freezing Sky clan disciples standing on the frozen sky. 100,000 berserkers are in Freezing Sky. The berserkers of Freezing Sky are in sky mist. The old man let out a loud roar that shook the sky. Su Ming stood on the ninth summit. Even if he knew some things the others did not know, but when he heard the old man's words, an endless amount of fighting spirit rose in his heart. But soon, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he recovered. What a powerful, bewitching power! Su Ming mumbled. If he did not possess divine sense, it would have been difficult for him to recover from the bewitching state just now. He sucked in a deep breath and turned his head around to look at Ziche beside him. Ziche's fighting spirit was burning fiercely at that moment. It was as if the moment Su Ming gave the order, he would immediately rush out. Ziche, since you chose to join this battle, I will give you your freedom. You don't need to protect me during this battle, Su Ming said. Ziche was momentarily stunned. He looked at Su Ming and was just about to say something. I've already made my decision regarding this. If you follow me, the chances of you being in danger will increase by a lot. You won't be able to control your own actions, and in this battlefield, this sort of thing will easily lead to your death. You're free, Su Ming stated calmly. Yes. Ziche remained silent for a moment before he bowed respectfully toward Su Ming. Su Ming turned his head around and cast one last look at the ninth summit before he turned around abruptly. Just as he was about to take a step towards frozen sky, a gust of black mist suddenly manifested behind him. That black mist appeared incredibly suddenly, and before Su Ming could react to it, it surrounded his wrist and turned into a black bracelet. At the same time, his eldest senior brother's voice echoed in Su Ming's mind. Youngest junior brother, the journey to the land of the shamans will be filled with danger. I will give you this slave. Her name is Fa Zong. Su Ming paused and looked at the black bracelet on his arm. His gaze fell on the glacier under the ninth summit. Once he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards that direction, he turned into a long arc and charged into the sky. Ziche followed behind him. The two of them fused into the long arcs formed by the other people who were heading to Frozen Sky and stepped onto the gigantic sword along with the other people. The instant he stepped onto the sword, Su Ming immediately felt a wave of power fusing into his body from under his feet before swiftly returning to the sword. Soon after, even if he could not see the brand of his life force on the sword, he could still clearly feel its existence. He also knew where the brand of his life force was located on the sword. As time passed by, more people from Freezing Sky Clan arrived and stepped on a Frozen Sky. When there were about 10,000 people gathered on the gigantic sword, the sword shuddered and slowly rose into the sky. Send off our warriors. An old voice rang out from within the gate of heaven. Soon after, countless figures flew out from within the gate of heaven. There were also a large number of figures that either flew out from the 9 mountains on the ground or stood on the mountains. They all looked at the gigantic sword in the sky and the nearly 10,000 people on it. These people were packed densely together, and by the looks of it, there were tens of thousands of them. First, send off our warriors. May the soul of the god of berserkers protect the people of Freezing Sky. We will definitely win. As the old voice echoed in the air, all the people wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards the sword in the sky. The moment they bowed, the near 10,000 people on the sword immediately became excited. They looked at the ground, at the many familiar faces on the ground, at the familiar schools, and fell silent. Once again, send off our warriors. May the progenitors of Freezing Sky protect you and let you return safely. Su Ming stood at the edge of the sword with Ziche by his side. Besides Ziche, Su Ming did not know the other people beside him. He looked at the ground at the 9th summit and could vaguely see his master standing at the top of the mountain. He also saw Hu Zi, who was drinking and waving at him at the mountainside. He also saw his second senior brother smiling gently under the sunlight. He also saw Han Songzi. She was looking at him from the 7th summit. Han Fei Zi from the 3rd summit was also looking at him with a freezing aura spreading out from her entire body. Then, a gaze attracted Su Ming's attention. When he lifted his head, he saw a woman in white looking at him from one of the continents in Heaven Gate. One last bow. You are the warriors of freezing sky. In this battle, you will wash the land of the shamans with blood. The old voice's low growl echoed in the air, stirring up almost all the people on the sword to shout. Wash the land of the shamans with blood. Wash the land of the shamans with blood. The voices echoed in Su Ming's ears. He stood there silently and closed his eyes. The moment he closed his eyes, the frozen sky, sword under his feet, shuddered once again and slowly changed the direction of the tip of the sword. As the remaining people of Freezing Sky Clan and the person on the sword roared at the same time, the sword charged towards Sky Mist City. The instant it charged out, a screen of light surrounded the sword and turned into an oval shield of light. It stirred up a piercing sound, and with a bang, it charged into the distance. It traveled so quickly that in the blink of an eye, Freezing Sky Clan could no longer be seen. The ground underneath was no longer covered in silver snow, but was instead covered in green. Su Ming opened his eyes. He could clearly feel that the speed of Frozen Sky's sword could almost compare to his speed after he removed most of the ice hoops. Although if Su Ming removed all the ice hoops, he had the confidence that he could surpass the sword in a short distance. But if the distance was just a little further, Su Ming's body would immediately be unable to withstand it, and he would not be able to compare to the sword. After all, this was one of Freezing Sky Clan's priceless treasures. With its speed, they would only need a few days to reach Sky Mist City. Are you afraid? Once they left Freezing Sky Clan and the 100,000 feet sword charged forward, the old man, standing at the tip of the sword, turned his head around and laughed. No! Someone immediately shouted from the near 10,000 people on the sword. That's a lie. The shamans are brutal. It's fine if you're afraid, but once you chop off the heads of those shamans, you'll realize that you're not the only one who's afraid. Darn it, they're also afraid of you. The old man's laughter was hearty, and the bewitching tone from before was no longer there. Also, we have quite a lot of people on our side. There might only be near 10,000 people on the sword, but those bastards from Western Sea Clan will also send near 10,000 people to participate in this. All the tribes in the land of Berserkers will also be sent to Sky Mist City during this period of time. At that time, we'll have a lot of people. This is what a great war is. This is the great war that happens once every century. If you don't die in this war, then you'll go through training and become powerful berserkers. The old man's laughter reverberated in the air and spread through the entire 100,000 feet sword. Now sit down and meditate. Make sure that you're at the peak of your condition. We'll need 4 days to reach Sky Mist City. As the old man's voice rang out, many people chose to sit down cross-legged on the seemingly endless sword and wait for 4 days before stepping into Heavenly Mist City. Su Ming remained silent. He sat down cross-legged. He was at the edge of the sword, and before him was the vast sky. He could see a screen of light covering the sky, and behind it was a blue sky with clouds tumbling about. What are you looking at? A delicate voice came from behind Su Ming. He did not turn his head back, because the person who spoke was sitting right beside him. Let's see how big the land of South Morning is. Su Ming said softly and turned his head sideways to look at Tian Lan Meng beside him. Tian Lan Meng's face was still pale. She looked towards the sky beyond the sword, and no one knew what she was thinking. What do the 10 shooting stars represent? Su Ming suddenly asked. It's nothing. Don't ask. Tian Lan Meng was silent for a long while before she shook her head. Then what does the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands mean? Su Ming looked at Tian Lan Meng and asked. Tian Lan Meng shuddered. She turned her head around, and shock appeared in her beautiful eyes as she looked at Su Ming. 2 days, 8 chapters. I can't write anymore. The war is about to start. The wind is blowing. Please get monthly votes. Also, can anyone guess what the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands means? This is a very interesting setting. No one should be able to guess it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 335. Within 2 days, he had written 25,000 words. Although his monthly votes did not reach the 2,600 that he had agreed upon, he still managed to update one chapter. In fact, he wanted to update 4 chapters regardless of whether he reached it or not. However, he was too ferocious yesterday and felt a little tired today. He could not continue writing until the 3rd chapter. It's hot in the summer, and I'm not skinny. I'm sweating profusely, and there's even a towel on the keyboard. All the air conditioners, please give me your monthly votes. All the fans, please give me your votes too. There's an air conditioner at home, but I smoke. There's an electric fan at home, but the more I blow, the hotter it gets. Can you imagine a bespectacled guy who's not very skinny typing while wiping his sweat, seeking monthly votes? To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 336. Su Ming looked at Tian Lanmeng calmly. Their gazes met at the corner, not too far away from the edge of the gigantic sword. Tian Lanmeng remained silent for a moment before she said softly, I don't know what you're talking about. What's the point of hiding it like this? Su Ming frowned and turned his head around to look at the clear blue sky beyond frozen sky. Tian Lanmeng hesitated for a moment, as if she wanted to say something, but hesitated. After a long while, her gaze fell on the side of Su Ming's face, and she asked, How did you know about the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands? The large sword was not quiet around the two of them. Whispers would occasionally spread out, but the area covered by the sword was too large, and there were nearly 10,000 people sitting on it. So if they were slightly further away, they would not be able to hear it clearly. Also, the whistling sounds of the sword slicing through the air could be heard. When the 10 meteors arrived, I heard some of the sounds they made. Su Ming did not hide anything. He had to know the truth behind this. To him, this sort of thing that only those in the Berserker Soul realm would know was incredibly crucial. In fact, it could even decide some of his actions in the land of the shamans. Tian Lanmeng averted her gaze and looked at the sky beyond the sword. After some time, she spoke in a gentle voice. Have you heard of the legend of Harmonious Morris Alba? Su Ming was momentarily stunned. He shook his head and did not speak. Tian Lanmeng looked at the sky beyond the sword and said softly, Harmonious Morris Alba is a legendary butterfly. It will flap its wings 3 times in its life. The first time it flaps its wings, it will cause the mountains in the east to crumble and the earth to crack. It's just a legend, Su Ming said slowly. Legend, huh? Right now, no one in the world has ever seen the first god of berserkers. Are you saying that the first god of berserkers is also a legend? We don't know whether Harmonious Morris Alba exists. Tian Lanmeng shook her head. 9 shooting stars mean that a great patriarch has appeared in the shaman tribe. That is a form that surpasses life, and it is a realm of cultivation that surpasses what we know. Tian Lanmeng's voice was gentle in Su Ming's mind, but there was a hint of fear within her words. Su Ming could also feel it clearly as it echoed in his mind. Great patriarch? Su Ming turned his head around and looked at Tian Lanmeng. You should know that 1,000 years ago, the 3 powerful berserkers of the land of South Morning fought against the great duke of the shaman tribe. In the end, the 3 powerful berserkers won, but the great patriarch of a shaman tribe did not die. He fell in a deep sleep. He can't die. Now, he has woken up. That's why Sky Mist City sent out 9 shooting stars to notify Freezing Sky Clan and Western Sea Clan. Tian Lanmeng bit her bottom lip and whispered. Su Ming's pupils shrank. After a moment of silence, he spoke slowly. What about 10? In the land of South Morning, 9 shooting stars flying from Sky Mist City to Freezing Sky and Eastern Sea is the limit. From what I can remember, ever since Sky Mist City was built, there have never been 10 shooting stars. This is the first time. Tian Lanmeng's face was pale as she mumbled. Based on my deductions, if 5 shooting stars is a great disaster, 8 shooting stars means that the berserkers of the land of South Morning will face destruction, and 9 shooting stars means that the shaman tribe's momentum has reached its peak. Then 10 shooting stars might be. When Tian Lanmeng said those words, She paused for a moment, as if she was thinking about how she should continue speaking. At that moment, Su Ming spoke softly by her side. The fall of the land of South Morning. Once Su Ming said those words, Tian Lanming shuddered. Her face turned stark white, and after a long while, she nodded her head in anguish. Just what sort of thing could cause the fall of the land of South Morning? Su Ming was in slight disbelief. He could not understand just what sort of power existed in the world that could do such a terrifying thing. Even if it's the great patriarch of the shaman tribe, if he truly has such power, then there's no need for this battle to continue, Su Ming said in a low voice. He might have great power and has surpassed the realm we know, but he can't do this. But just because he can't do it doesn't mean that no one can. Didn't the second god of berserkers fight against the immortals from the other worlds, split the land of the berserkers? Tian Lanming said softly, "Do you still remember the harmonious Morris Alba I told you about just now?" Tian Lanming looked at Su Ming, and he could clearly see the fear in her eyes. The first time harmonious Morris Alba flaps its wings, it will cause the mountains in the east to crumble and the earth to crack. Su Ming answered in a low voice. The east represents the eastern wastelands. Between the 5 continents of the land of the berserkers is a boundless dead sea that looks like an ocean, but is not an ocean, like ink, but is not ink, like blood, but is not blood. No one can pass through that dead sea. Ever since the 5 continents were split apart, they lost contact with each other, as if they were cut off. Tian Lanming's voice echoed in Su Ming's mind. If the Dead Sea spreads out one day and submerges the entire land of South Morning like a tsunami, then at that time, how many people will survive? Tian Lanming lowered her head. Perhaps there will be some who will survive, but if the mountains crumble and the earth shatter when the land of South Morning is submerged and the entire land of South Morning shatters, then at that time, how many people will survive? Will you and I be able to? Tian Lanming closed her eyes. This is the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands? But what is it connected to the Eastern Wastelands? Su Ming's heart trembled and his breathing quickened. A thought that he found hard to believe rose in his head. Tian Lanming remained silent for a moment before she spoke in anguish. The Dead Sea won't spread out for no reason. It has existed since ancient times, and if there is no reason, it will not change. Unless there's a power that is pushing this endless Dead Sea forward and making it stir up huge waves like the ocean. Su Ming mumbled, "You only heard the words catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands, but you didn't hear what I said before. My ancestor said that in the east of South Morning, there's an area of more than 100,000 feet near the edge of the Dead Sea that has already been submerged by the Dead Sea. This is the first time such a change has happened in the land of South Morning, and it is also this change that caused the shamans to panic and attack Sky Mist Barrier ahead of schedule. The Dead Sea won't spread out for no reason. It's spreading out because the Eastern Wastelands, a continent that is incredibly far away from the land of South Morning, is pushing the Dead Sea towards the land of South Morning at an unimaginable speed." Tian Lanming finally revealed the secret that Sky Mist City had told all those in the Berserker Soul realm, but had forbidden it from spreading out. The collision between the Eastern Wastelands and the land of South Morning. Su Ming sucked in a sharp breath. He understood now, but he still could not imagine how a gigantic continent could move at such a high speed. Perhaps it will take a year, or perhaps it will take 10 years, or perhaps it won't even take 10 years. Eventually, one day, when the Eastern Wastelands will crash into the land of South Morning at this extreme speed, what do you think will happen to the land of South Morning? According to the ancient map, the area of the Eastern Wastelands is several times that of the land of South Morning. As Tian Lanming looked at Su Ming, despair appeared in her eyes. Su Ming shuddered and closed his eyes. He could vaguely imagine the terrifying things that would happen the instant these 2 continents, one big and one small, crashed into each other at that indescribable speed. First, the eastern edge of the land of South Morning will instantly shatter. This shattering will continue spreading due to the force of the crash from the Eastern Wastelands, and within a short period of time, it will affect Sky Mist Barrier. Then, Sky Mist Barrier will shatter, and the land of the berserkers will shatter as well. Even if we flee to the westernmost part of the land, it will still be difficult for us to avoid this fate of destruction. When the land shatters and tilts, the Dead Sea that comes with the eastern wastelands will drown everything. Perhaps there will be some people who will survive. The land under their feet will shatter, and they will be like islands in the endless Dead Sea. But it's clear that it will be difficult for such a fortuitous encounter to be found at the borders of the land of South Morning, especially with this crash. Once the land of South Morning withstands this force, it will move to the west. At that time, the western part of the land of South Morning and all the other borders will become the most devastating places. And the shamans live at the borders of the land of South Morning. For the sake of survival, you can already imagine just how devastating the Battle of Sky Mist this time will be. The shamans want to step into Sky Mist barrier and occupy the center of the land of South Morning. Only there might be a way for them to ensure the continuation of their race when the disaster arrives. But can you let your generations of enemies enter your home? Besides, if they enter Sky Mist barrier, you'll have to give them some regions. The result of this is that if you give some of the relatively safer places to the shamans during the disaster, it will be the same as destroying the lives of the berserkers that should have existed in those places. Besides, no one can be certain just which part of the core will be the safest. If the shamans aren't around, the berserkers can spread out, and there will always be a possibility for them to survive. But if they make the wrong choice and give the safest place to the shamans. Tian Lan Meng's voice became softer and softer, and eventually, she fell silent. The catastrophe of the eastern wastelands. Su Ming's face turned pale. All of this had surpassed his imagination. In fact, even when he heard the truth, he still found it hard to believe. Similarly, he immediately understood why this matter could not be told to everyone. Once they did, then it would bring about an unimaginable disaster. Harmonious Morris Alba. Su Ming remembered that name, even if he knew that it was just a legend that might just be a coincidence. We won't be able to keep this a secret for long. As time passes by, more people will know about it, Su Ming said, and his voice turned into a heavy weight in Tian Lan Meng's heart. Many people will die in this disaster. We were born at this time, and we have no other choice. Tian Lan Meng stood up and stood at the edge of a sword. A profound look appeared in her eyes. Thank goodness we're not alone. Tian Lan Meng turned her head to the side and looked at Su Ming with her beautiful eyes. A strange light shone in her eyes. Su Ming, think of all ways to increase your power before the catastrophe of the Eastern Wasteland arrives. That way, even if you lose the land of South Morning and everything else, as long as you're still alive, then you'll still have your power to support you. Su Ming looked at the sky beyond the sword and fell silent. I admire all the prophets. Quite a number of them managed to guess Harmonious Morris Alba, but none of them managed to guess the disaster brought by Harmonious Morris Alba. Haha, if you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 337. Knowing too much isn't always a good thing. Su Ming sat at the edge of the sword, and his master's words before they parted appeared in his head. This was what Tian Xiezi had said when he had asked him about the 10 shooting stars. At that moment, Su Ming understood the meaning behind those words. Knowing too much might indeed not always be a good thing. It was just like how Su Ming saw the eastern wastelands pushing the Dead Sea towards him. He looked at the rapidly moving ground under the sky, at the mountains rising and falling, and even at the vague outline of some tribes. Yet in the blink of an eye, the mountains on the ground crumbled before his eyes. The ground looked as if it had been lifted up, and at the same time, the black Dead Sea spread out, drowning out all signs of life. Tian Lan Meng sat beside Su Ming in silence. No one knew what she was thinking about, or perhaps her mind was completely blank. Time trickled by, and soon the first night arrived. The sky was dark, but a white line could be seen in the distance, as if there was light in that direction. After meditating for a day, the freezing Sky Clan disciples on the sword gradually started moving around. Those who were familiar with each other formed groups of 3 to 5, and their laughter echoed in the air. It was as if they were using this method to calm their minds before the battle against sky mist. Cheers and laughter traveled out from the sword wound in frozen sky. As Su Ming looked at them, at the people who did not know the truth, he could already imagine that if all these people knew the answer, then how many of them would still be able to laugh, and how many of them would still be able to fight in this battle. When Su Ming looked at the freezing Sky Clan disciples, he also saw a person from Heaven Gate sitting at the edge of the sword, separated by a certain distance. The distance between them was roughly the same. There was also the old man sitting at the tip of the sword. His expression was calm, but from the occasional frown between his brows, Su Ming could tell that this person's state of mind was perhaps not as calm as his words and expression made him seem. He knows the truth. Perhaps these 9 people from Heaven Gate know the truth. Su Ming swept his gaze past Jing Chungrong sitting at the tip of the sword. That person suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Su Ming with a gaze as sharp as lightning. Su Ming closed his eyes. He could feel the person's gaze on him, and it felt as if he was being pricked by needles. It only disappeared after a long while. "Your name is Su Ming?" An old voice suddenly traveled into Su Ming's ears. As Su Ming opened his eyes, he immediately saw Jing Chungrong standing at the tip of the sword. He did not avert his gaze and was still looking at Su Ming, but there was no longer that fierce look in his eyes. Su Ming nodded. "Come to me." Jing Chungrong looked at Su Ming, and his voice echoed in Su Ming's ears. This was different from the method Tian Lan Ming used to send her voice into his mind, but the effect was similar. Su Ming hesitated for a moment before he stood up. Tian Lan Ming cast him a glance, but did not speak. Su Ming walked forward and walked past the crowd. He walked past his fellow sect members who were meditating. He heard their laughter and words that were sometimes near and sometimes far away. He sensed the different breaths of the people meditating. When he walked a long distance away and arrived at the tip of the sword, he arrived before Jing Chungrong. His previous location wasn't too far away from here. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for the two of them to see each other. Even if they walked over, it would have taken them some time. "Sit," Jing Chungrong said hoarsely as he looked at Su Ming. He was at the tip of the sword, and he was facing the endless space before him. It was also the spot where the whistling sounds were the strongest. In fact, while standing there, Su Ming could vaguely feel wind crashing against his face. He could sense the power of the sword slicing through space at that extreme speed. There was about 100-something feet between them, and Jing Chungrong was the only one sitting there. Without his summons, no one could come to this place. Su Ming did not speak. He sat down beside the old man, and the moment he did so, he suddenly felt as if a violent gust of wind was blowing against his face. His breathing quickened, and he even felt as if his body was about to be torn apart. This feeling came too suddenly. In fact, Su Ming felt as if his body was about to be blown away by that violent gust of wind and was about to be blown off the 100,000 feet sword. His hair was a mess, and it swayed rapidly behind him. Su Ming could not sit down. He staggered a few steps back, and a glint appeared in his eyes. Once his foot landed on the ground, he managed to stop himself. His face flushed red, and he took a few steps forward once again. Once he returned to the spot where he was about to sit, he sat down slowly. The moment he sat down, that feeling of being torn apart appeared once again. However, this time, Su Ming was prepared. Banging sounds came from his body, and slowly he sat down. As he sat there, Su Ming trembled. His blood flowed rapidly through his body, and the power of transcendence within him moved along with it. Even his divine sense spread out. At that moment, his body was resisting against the power of that violent gust of wind on its own, and he could not control it. This is what body refinement is. When Jing Chungrong saw Su Ming sitting down, praise appeared in his eyes. Even if you have 20 incredibly heavy ice hoops on you, you'll only be able to refine the skin of your body. The praise in the old man's eyes disappeared and was replaced by disdain. Su Ming found it hard to breathe. He could not speak, but there was doubt in his eyes. This was the method he had thought of, and this method had indeed increased the speed at which he could withstand the wind by a lot. In fact, if he used his full speed, he could even surpass frozen sky in a short distance. You're not convinced? I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. Jing Chungrong let out a cold harumph. He suddenly lifted his right hand and grabbed Su Ming's shoulder, then flung him to the side. The old man's actions were too quick. Su Ming could not dodge at all. He only felt his vision blur, and as the old man flung him, he was flung out of Frozen Sky's body. In fact, the power of that fling had not only flung Su Ming out of the sword, it had also flung the protective screen of light around the sword, causing Su Ming to instantly leave the sword and find himself in the middle of the night, right in the middle of the violent gust of wind howling. Only at that moment did the people on the sword see this scene, and they instantly let out cries of surprise. The instant Su Ming was flung out of Frozen Sky, booming sounds immediately came from his body. The sword was so quick that in the blink of an eye, it had already traveled 100,000 feet. When he could see his surroundings clearly, he saw the sword hilt flashing past his eyes. The violent gust of wind it brought with it swept up Su Ming's body, causing him to be unable to stand still. Anger appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had not offended the old man, but he had done this to him. However, he did not have time to think about it. When he saw that the sword was about to leave into the distance, booming sounds immediately came from Su Ming's body. All the ice hoops exploded at that instant, and his speed instantly reached a terrifying degree as he charged towards the sword that was leaving into the distance. His speed could surpass the sword in a short distance. His body seemed to have shot through the air and appeared 1,000 feet behind the sword. The violent gust of wind tore at Su Ming's body, and red appeared in his eyes. He charged forward once again, and when he reappeared, he had already caught up to the sword. However, he was only beside the sword hilt. Blood trickled down the corners of Su Ming's mouth. He took a swift step forward and passed through the protective screen before landing on the sword hilt at the end of the charging sword. The moment he landed, Su Ming coughed out a huge mouthful of blood, and his face turned stark pale. Su Ming wiped away the blood at the corners of his mouth and strode forward. Wherever he went, all the people who saw him would look at him with shock and admiration in their eyes, and they would open up a path for him. Just now, they had seen Su Ming chasing after the sword with their own eyes. However, the sword was, after all, too big. That was why there were not many people who could see the entire process. Su Ming continued charging forward, and after a moment, he covered a distance of 100,000 feet and returned to the tip of the sword. Jing Chungrong was sitting there and looking at Su Ming coldly. Still not convinced? Do you think that you're very powerful because you managed to catch up to the sword? Just what is body refinement? Su Ming stared at the old man and let out a deep breath. Letting your body bear weight and suddenly become lighter when you execute your speed is very stupid. What's the difference between you and a leaf? Perhaps you want to become a leaf. When the wind blows, the leaf will be blown even further away because it's light. But it won't be able to last for long. If it's too long, it will shatter. In fact, if you run into wind that goes against your direction and the two gusts of wind crash into each other, the leaf will immediately shatter. Do you believe me? The faster you go, the faster you die. Do you believe me? The old man said coldly. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly and was stunned. Jing Chungrong frowned and shouted at Su Ming, "If it wasn't for Bai Chong Zai, I wouldn't have bothered to enlighten you. Come here and sit down by my side." Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he walked to the old man's side. He wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards the old man before he sat down respectfully by the side. When Jing Chungrong was enlightening Su Ming, there was originally a cliff in the shape of a trapezoid located at the easternmost part of the land of South Morning. Now, most of the cliff was submerged by the Black Sea water. The sea water exuded a strange presence. The surface of the sea was not calm, but there were waves rising and falling. At that moment, there were 7 to 8 people dressed in red robes standing on the only remaining cliff. Their faces were pale, and there were colorful totems on their faces. One of them squatted down and looked carefully at the Dead Sea's waves that were crashing towards them from a position about 100 feet below the cliff. Another 10 feet higher. Before long, this cliff will also be submerged. Once this place is submerged, a large amount of the Dead Sea will spread out. At the same time the person spoke in a low voice, roars immediately came from the endless black Dead Sea before them. Soon, the waves became stronger, and a tail that was about 1,000 feet long shot out from the surface of the sea in the distance. With a bang, it crashed into the Dead Sea, stirring up even more waves. Further into the distance, there were more tails swinging out from the surface of the sea like this, and there were hundreds of them. The shamans' faces were pale. One of them, an old man who had his eyes closed all this while, opened them slowly. I can sense their fear. These soul alligators that should have existed in the depths of the Dead Sea were forced to come here due to their fear. The prophecy of Berserker's Realm Mountain isn't an ancient legend. It has come true. The old man mumbled and lifted his right hand to swing it at the sky. Immediately, a spot of light flew out from his hand and charged towards the dark surface of the sea. Once it flew into the distance, that spot of light exploded, causing a circular area of several hundreds of thousands of feet in the Dead Sea to instantly turn bright. Someone in the crowd instantly cried out in surprise, and his expression changed drastically. The explosion will still happen. My goal this month is to get into the top 3, so I will definitely have an explosion. Once I rest for a few days, I will continue exploding. My recommendation votes are going to explode. I need them urgently. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 338. No one knew what these sorcerer tribesmen saw. They disappeared at the edge of the land of South Morning that night. Only a few broken enchanted vessels could be seen on the ground several hundreds of leagues away. Besides that, there were no other clues. There were 8 of them, and all of them had disappeared. In fact, on the night they disappeared, no one in a shaman tribe near the Dead Sea that was not too far away from this place heard any sound. They did not even notice the ripples of power from a battle. It was as if these shamans had been devoured by the air out of nowhere. The land of the shamans had been enveloped in terror since a few months ago. That terror had not been hidden away, but had instead grown stronger and spread into the distance, causing a large number of shaman tribes near the Dead Sea to start migrating. This place was already uninhabitable. In the past, long arcs would occasionally appear in the land of the shamans. Within those long arcs was a ferocious beast with a dragon's head, but a horse's body. That beast was not big. It might only be several hundreds of feet big, but the murderous aura spreading out from its body made all those who got close to it feel afraid. The most distinct characteristic of this ferocious beast was the blue flames burning under its hooves. Usually, when the long arcs disappeared from the sky, a line of fiery hoof prints would be left behind, gradually fading away. All the shamans who saw this beast would have a pious expression on their faces. They would wrap their arms around their chests and bend their backs to worship it. There were even some who would kneel on the ground and look incredibly respectful, because this beast had a unique name. It was called Shaman Horse. Only the god of shamans' temple possessed this beast in the entire land of the shamans. Yet during the past few months, shaman horses with dragon heads and horse bodies began to appear in the sky of the land of the shamans. There were no less than hundreds of these ferocious beasts in the long arcs that charged through the sky. They went to all corners of the land of the shamans to deliver their orders and also to carry out their own tasks. As the rumors of the Dead Sea spread out, and as the shaman horses sent out orders, the entire land of shamans started migrating in a planned manner. A storm was coming. In truth, a storm had already arrived near Sky Mist Barrier. The sounds of battle shook the sky and earth. The sky was dark, and the ground gave off the stench of blood seeping into the soil. War arrived at the speed of lightning before the berserkers could even cover their ears. It arrived so suddenly that the berserkers were not even prepared for it. There were many places on this Sky Mist Barrier that stretched very far into the distance, especially Sky Mist City, which was the place where the most intense battles were taking place. At that moment, the sounds of battle reverberated in the air. Behind Sky Mist Barrier was the land of the Berserkers. In the sky in the distance, there were blue waves that stretched for tens of thousands of leagues. The clouds were spread out like scales, as if they were a sign that something was about to happen. In the sky was a gigantic sword that was 100,000 feet long, slicing through the sky at an incredible speed, stirring up a shocking whistle. As that whistle spread out, the sword charged towards Sky Mist City. Compared to the anxiety and terror in the land of the shamans, the land of the Berserkers was peaceful. Even if they had to face the great battle that only happened once a century, most of the Berserkers seemed to have gotten used to this sort of battle and did not treat it as a true battle to the death. Instead, they were going on a journey to gain experience. They believed that the existence of the Sky Mist Barrier could block the shamans outside. They believed that this battle would end after a few years, and when it ended, they would continue living in the land where their tribes thrived. That included most of the people on the gigantic sword that was flashing through the sky and stirring up a piercing boom. All of them believed this as well. This was a journey to gain experience, a battle that could shock the world with a single brilliant feat. Body refinement isn't something you can just take for granted. No matter how much weight you carry, besides making yourself as light as you imagine, there's no other use. Su Ming sat cross-legged on the tip of the gigantic sword. His face was pale, but he gritted his teeth and persevered. There was a violent gust of wind crashing into his face from where he sat, blowing at almost every part of his body, causing his flesh to tremble. In fact, even the flow of blood in his body seemed to be met with a strong resistance, causing his heart to feel as if it had lost its strength to beat. Behind Su Ming, Jing Chengrong sat calmly and spoke languidly. But the birds in the sky are light. That's why they can fly endlessly. Doesn't this also prove the effects of me carrying weights to train my body? Su Ming's lips trembled and his breathing quickened, but he gritted his teeth and said those words. What a laughable thought. You're only looking at birds? Then have you seen gigantic, ferocious beasts flying in the sky? Their speed is so fast that even us berserkers can't compare to them. Could it be that they're also very light? Jing Chengrong asked with a cold sneer. Su Ming fell silent. He could not find any words to refute even after a long time had passed. The image of the golden rock appeared in his head. Its gigantic body must have been incredibly heavy, but it still had that shocking speed. Carrying weights to train your body isn't right or wrong. It's fine to call it the first step, but there are too many disadvantages to this method. The true way to train your body is to control the laws of wind and the direction of wind resistance. You can use these two forces to push your body forward, and as you continue fusing them together, you'll be able to walk in the sky as if you're walking on flat ground. But even I haven't completely understood this method, so you don't have to think about it for the time being. But this is a direction. Only when your direction is correct can you pursue it. If your direction is wrong right from the start, then you'll only be wasting your time. As Jing Chengrong spoke in a low voice, he lifted his right hand and pointed toward the area before Su Ming. With that one point, a thin crack instantly appeared on the protective light barrier around the tip of the sword. The moment that crack appeared, Su Ming's body trembled furiously. He could feel the wind blowing against his skin, becoming several times stronger in an instant. The pain in his body, as if he was being torn apart, became even stronger. If you want to pursue this direction, then you must walk down the correct path. Now, imagine yourself as a gust of wind and feel the wind resistance coming towards you from the sky. Feel the reaction of all parts of your body when these two forces clash against each other. Blood flowed out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth. The pain in his body was so great that he could not bear it. The wind coming towards him was like a knife slicing through his body. There was not a single part of his body that did not hurt. His body swayed as he sat there, as if he was about to be swept away by the incoming wind at any moment and fall backwards. Trash! Jing Chengrong frowned and said coldly, If it wasn't for Bai Chang's Zai, I wouldn't have bothered with you. Senior Tian Xie does need to be respected, but as his disciple, you're not worthy." Jing Chungrong let out a harumph. At that moment, Su Ming was trembling. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth once again. His body, which had been sitting on the ground, was forced back 5 feet by the wind. His face was pale. The pain that traveled through his entire body made him feel as if he had lost his strength to even stand up. As the strong wind blew against him, it became incredibly difficult for him to circulate his qi. Even the flow of his power of transcendence became incredibly slow, as if there was a huge resistance. Under such circumstances, it was difficult for him to keep his body frozen in place. Trash will always be trash. You're so stubborn. Jing Chungrong lifted his right hand and pointed at the protective light screen before the tip of the sword where Su Ming was once again. Immediately, the crack that had appeared previously widened a little more with a ripping sound. Because of that, the wind blowing against Su Ming instantly became several times stronger, causing Su Ming to be forced back once again before he could get used to it. He even coughed out a mouthful of blood. The blood he coughed up was immediately blown away when it came into contact with a violent gust of wind. Yet strangely, at the same time the blood was blown away, a trace of blood fog that had been blown away stayed before Su Ming for the span of several breaths. Only then did it gradually disappear. You're still trash. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, I'll open up the crack a little more. If you can't handle it, then go back to the edge of the sword. Jing Chungrong frowned, and his face was cold. Su Ming's face was pale. Under the wind, it was difficult for him to even open and close his eyes, much less breathe. His body was trembling, and he had already reached his limit, but his eyes were fixed on the spot where the blood mist had been. He did not avert his gaze. Imagine yourself as a gust of wind. It's easy to say, but how do I do it? Su Ming's heart was filled with anguish, but he did not give up. Instead, he gritted his teeth and continued persevering. Yet he also knew that this sort of perseverance was not very useful. That blood mist. Why did it stay for the span of a few breaths before it was gradually blown away by the strong wind? In silence, Su Ming suddenly bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out another mouthful of blood. He stared at the blood he coughed up without caring about anything else in the wind. It was as if everything he saw had slowed down when he looked at it. He could clearly see the blood turning into mist when it first came into contact with the wind and tumbling backwards. However, there was a patch of blood mist that was only blown away when the wind passed through the thin gaps between them. At that instant, understanding appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He closed his eyes, and his body was gradually blown backwards by the wind once again. Why would Bai Chongzai value a trash like you? Jing Chungrong was already impatient, but before he could finish speaking, he widened his eyes. Su Ming's body was originally moving in the wind, but at that moment he stopped. Not only that, right before the old man's eyes, Su Ming stood up with his eyes closed and took a few steps forward. Once he returned to his original spot, he sat down cross-legged without any hesitation. At the instant he sat down, Su Ming's hair danced rapidly in the air, and his robes fluttered madly, but he did not move back in the face of the violent gust of wind. He might still be trembling, but compared to how he was before this, he was completely different. Jing Chungrong watched for a moment, and surprise gradually appeared on his face. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the protective screen of light around the tip of Su Ming's sword once again, causing the crack to widen by quite a bit and the wind to become even stronger. If it had been before, Su Ming's body would definitely not have been able to withstand it, and he would have tumbled backwards. Yet now, Su Ming sat firmly on the ground and simply allowed the wind to blow against the front of his body. Then it would pass through his back. If you like this work, please come at Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 339. When he saw some of the wind blowing towards Su Ming coming out from behind him, Jing Chungrong's expression instantly turned serious. He suddenly understood why Bai Chongzai valued this Su Ming so much. Su Ming, what a man! Jing Chungrong mumbled. I originally wanted him to be stimulated by my words so that he could last longer. After all, the wind blowing towards us at this speed in frozen sky is definitely not something ordinary. It's the best wind for body refinement. Only one person can obtain the serendipity of body refinement at the tip of the sword. I only let this person train here because of Bai Chong Zai. But I didn't expect that this person's comprehensive abilities would reach such a level. He actually managed to understand this realm. Jing Chungrong looked at Su Ming with bright eyes. I told him to imagine himself as wind. That way, when two types of wind crashed into each other, he could sense the power of wind and obtain the effects of body refinement. He could use wind to refine wind, but what he understood surpassed this realm. He could allow wind to pass through his body, and from then on, when he ran into wind, there would be no wind. He could be neither here nor there. Jing Chungrong was stunned for a moment, and a strange look appeared in his eyes as he looked at Su Ming. Su Ming sat there for a long time before he opened his eyes. At the instant he did so, there was only calmness within them. Senior Jing, the wind is a little weak. Could you make the crack a little bigger? Jing Chungrong let out a harumph, but he did not call Su Ming a piece of trash anymore. Instead, he lifted his right hand and pointed at the spot before Su Ming. Immediately, the crack widened a little, causing the wind blowing towards them to become stronger. The instant the wind blew towards Su Ming, he closed his eyes. All the pores on his body opened up, and in his head, he imagined his body turning into the blood fog. There were countless fine cracks in his body, and those cracks would allow the wind to pass through as if he did not exist. It was as if his pores could breathe. When the wind blew on his body, it would be absorbed by his pores in a strange manner. It would rapidly transform and exchange within his body before spreading out from the pores on his back. However, this method of breathing could not replace Su Ming's real breathing. It would still make him feel as if he was suffocating. In fact, as he exchanged breaths within his body, he would feel an increasing amount of pain. However, this method did indeed allow him to maintain a speed that surpassed that of carrying weights even when the wind was crashing against his face. In fact, the amount of time he could last was also increased by quite a lot. Time passed by. When the second night arrived, Su Ming opened his eyes and took a few swift steps back. He took a few deep breaths, and his face gradually returned to normal. He had done this many times throughout the day. Jing Chungrong still did not speak. Instead, he continued sizing up Su Ming with a strange gaze, watching Su Ming breathing through his pores. For what I know, there are some ferocious beasts that don't need their mouths and noses to breathe. They use their skin as their mouths and noses. If I didn't know that you're a berserker and saw you occasionally suffocating, I would have thought that you were a ferocious beast in disguise, Jing Chungrong said strangely. Your method is different from my previous judgment, but by the looks of it, you won't be able to last long with this method. In the end, it's not perfect, Jing Chungrong said unhurriedly after a moment of pensive silence. But my speed is much faster than before, and the time I can last is much longer as well. I'm already very satisfied with this result. As for a more perfect method, I'll need to survive this battle before I have the right to understand it, Su Ming said in a low voice after a moment of silence. Jing Chungrong did not seem to agree, but he seemed to have remembered something. He did not refute Su Ming's words, but instead let out a sigh. Perhaps you're right. I'll only have a chance if I survive. Train on your own. I'm a little tired. He shook his head, closed his eyes, and started meditating quietly. Stars shone brightly in the night sky, but Su Ming did not have time to look at them. Once he rested for a moment, he took a deep breath and went to the vent at the tip of the sword once again. Once he sat down cross-legged, he used this method that even Jing Chungrong could not quite understand to begin the refinement process. In truth, Su Ming did not really understand this method. He had only come up with this method on his own based on the inspiration he received from the blood fog not dispersing. This method might not seem difficult, but controlling all the pores in his body to breathe required fine control, and it was difficult for a normal person to do so. Even Su Ming needed to continuously try before he could slowly find some patterns and slowly begin the refinement process that was completely different from carrying heavy weights. I can't give up even if I carry heavy weights. It's not like what other people say is completely correct. Besides, this battle might last for many years, and the devastation will be unimaginable. Surviving is the most important thing. A determined look appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he closed them. The night passed by gradually. When the sun rose on the third morning, Su Ming saw a different kind of sunrise in the sky. The magnificence of that sunrise attracted Su Ming's attention. After a long while, he closed his eyes and immersed himself in the refinement of the wind. When night fell once again, and when the third night passed and a new morning arrived, Su Ming stood up and walked towards Jing Chungrong, who still had his eyes closed as if he was sleeping. The moment he walked over, the old man opened his eyes. "Senior Jing, thank you for your guidance." Su Ming wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards him with gratitude in his eyes. "You don't have to thank me now. If you can survive this battle, you can thank me then." Su Ming was already somewhat used to the way Jing Chungrong spoke. When he heard it, he smiled and brought out the wooden slip Tian Xiezi had given him from his bosom before handing it over respectfully to the old man. Jing Chungrong took the wooden slip and cast it a glance before he frowned. "Senior, I would like to leave here," Su Ming said calmly. "Take Senior Tian Xiezi's plate. You can leave at any time you want, but there's still a day or so left before you reach Sky Mist City. If you leave now, then you'll have to head to Sky Mist City yourself." Jing Chungrong lifted his head and cast Su Ming a glance. "If there's nothing really important, then I suggest you not do this. This is very important to me." Su Ming looked towards the old man. "I'll give you 7 days. With your speed, you should be able to reach Sky Mist City. You'll be able to sense the specific location with the brand of your life force on the sword. If you don't return after 7 days, then you'll be treated as a traitor." Jing Chungrong waved his arm and threw the wooden slip in his hand towards Su Ming before he closed his eyes once again and no longer bothered with Su Ming. However, when he waved his arm just now, a spot on the protective screen of light on the sword behind him started distorting. Clearly, that spot was the exit he had temporarily opened for Su Ming. Su Ming took the wooden slip and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards the old man. He turned around and looked at Zi Che, who was looking at him from the edge of the sword in the crowd. Su Ming smiled faintly and nodded his head. An encouraging look appeared in his eyes. Zi Che fell silent. He looked at Su Ming and also nodded his head. As for Tian Lanming, she was still sitting at the edge of the sword with her back turned towards Su Ming. Her hair fell over her shoulders, and she looked as if she was looking at the sky. No one knew what she was thinking about. Su Ming averted his gaze, and under the surprised gazes of the people around him, he charged towards the temporary door that was opened behind the old man. In a flash, he passed through the distorting screen of light. The instant Su Ming left the screen of light, a deafening boom reverberated in his ears. As that boom continued, frozen sky charged into the distance. When Su Ming turned his head back to look, he could only see a black dot disappearing into the distance. Disappearing along with it was the violent boom from just now. Silence gradually returned to the vast sky. Su Ming stood alone and looked into the distance. After a long while, he averted his gaze and took a step towards the ground. The instant he moved forward, due to the explosion of the ice hoops around him, his speed instantly reached an astonishing degree. As he charged forward, he also felt a strong wind blowing against his face. The moment that wind came close to him, Su Ming activated the breathing art he had come to understand on his own. With a flash, he disappeared without a trace. This speed had already reached a terrifying degree. After a moment, a violent gust of wind suddenly appeared at the top of one of the mountain ranges in the land of the Berserkers. There were also distortions in the air and ripples spread out. Su Ming's body gathered together like an afterimage, and he stood at the top of the mountain. His face was pale. Once he appeared, he took in a few deep breaths before he gradually recovered. However, his eyes were bright and his heart raced against his chest. My speed is much faster than before, and I can even last for an hour. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. Once the qi in his body calmed down, he lowered his head and looked at the foot of the mountain. Not too far away from him was a small berserker tribe in a village surrounded by wood. Smoke rose from the chimneys of the tribe in the morning. Su Ming could hear the faint sound of children playing. As he stood there, Su Ming saw the people in the small tribe starting a new day. This was the second time Su Ming had come to this tribe. His gaze was trained on a seemingly normal house within the tribe. With a sway of his body, he walked down the mountain toward the tribe. Su Ming's arrival was silent. With his level of cultivation, he could enter the small tribe without anyone noticing him. When he appeared outside the normal house in the village, Su Ming heard a song from the sun coming from within the house. The song from the sun was filled with tranquility, causing all those who heard it to calm down. Su Ming stood there and closed his eyes, immersing himself in the song from the sun. After a long while, the song gradually faded away, and an old voice came raspily from the house. "You're here. I am Su Ming. I would like to meet you, senior." Su Ming opened his eyes. His gaze was calm as he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed. "Come in. I've already repaired your son." Su Ming lifted the door to the house with a respectful look on his face. The moment he stepped into the house, he saw that it was the same as before. Even the spot where he sat had not changed. It was as if the old sun maker had never stood up during this period of time. He was looking at Su Ming with a kind smile on his face. There was no life in his eyes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 340. Dear ticket owners in Nouveau Riche, I have something to say in view of the weakening of recommendation tickets in the past few weeks. If a horse wants to run fast, there must be night grass. If a worker works more, there must be tickets. This is a reward. There will be another explosion this week. Who knows when it will happen? Now I need the reward from the bosses. Don't be a stingy boss. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 341. Su Ming might not be able to sense any ripples of power from the old man before him, and he even felt as if he was a candle flame that could be extinguished with a gust of wind, but Su Ming's heart was filled with respect. He respected the old man, not because Tian Xiezi had to sit quietly before him. He respected the old man, not because he was mysterious, but because Tian Xiezi had to change his clothes before him. There was only one reason why Su Ming respected the old man. He had repaired the ordinary bone sun for him. That sun contained Su Ming's memories, and repairing it was a kindness to Su Ming. He was grateful to the old man. That was why he respected him from the bottom of his heart. This was something that would never change no matter how high Su Ming's level of cultivation was, or even if the old man was truly immortal. I will remember your kindness in restoring the sun for the rest of my life. Su Ming wrapped his fist in his palm toward the old man and bowed deeply. A smile appeared on the old sun maker's face. He groped about the straw mat beside him with his right hand, and soon he brought out the bone sun that belonged to Su Ming. There are some things that cannot be considered kindness. Since you believe that I, a blind man, could repair it and were willing to give it to me, then it is fated with me, and you are also fated with me. This is fate, not kindness. The old man held the bone sun in his right hand and gently caressed it with his left. Come, sit in front of me, the old man said softly. This sun is damaged, but its external injuries aren't important. What's important is that it has no soul. Did its previous owner disperse when he played the sun song? Su Ming fell silent and sat down before the old man. As he looked at the bone sun in the old man's hands, a hint of grief flashed briefly in his eyes. That should be it. The old man sighed. Not only did its previous owner's life disappear, the sun's soul also disappeared, causing it to no longer want to make any sound. This is the main reason why it was damaged. The old man lifted his hand and handed the bone sun forward. It was only at this moment that Su Ming could tell that the old man was indeed blind based on the details. Can it make sound now? Su Ming took the bone sun in his hands. The cracks on the sun had now turned into bloodlines, making it look as if the cracks had been sewn together. The sun had also become much heavier, and it felt heavy in his hands. I can only heal its external injuries. As for the fact that its soul is no longer willing to bend, that is not something that I can change. The only one who can change it is you, said the old man softly. I've always believed that the sun has a soul, and that the sound it makes is a whimper. If the sun had no soul, how could it bear the weight of one's emotions? How could it emit a sound that allows one to be immersed in it? However, some people can sense the soul of the sun, while others can't. The old man looked at Su Ming, but the lifeless look in his eyes gave others a feeling that the world he saw was different from the world around him. The sun has a soul, Su Ming mumbled. He remembered the many lonely nights he had held the sun and quietly played a song that only he could hear. The sorrow in the song was like moonlight shining on the earth, causing Su Ming to recite the memories of the song time and time again. The sun's soul is already dead. That kind of death is faint and cannot be explained, but the first time I saw it, I knew that its soul was no longer there. If you want it to make sound once again, to make the sound that belongs to you and the sound you want to hear, then you will need to give it a new soul. There was an ancient tone to the old man's voice as it echoed in the house. Occasionally, the sounds of children playing could be heard from outside. It sounded as if they were near, but at the same time, they seemed to be far away, causing Su Ming to fall into a daze as he listened. How could I do this? Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the old man. Forget it. The old man remained silent for a moment before he closed his eyes. Su Ming looked at the sun in his hands and was stunned for a long time. He got up and bowed deeply towards the old man. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, his footsteps came to a halt. Senior, there are many disasters in the land of South Morning, and this tribe is located not too far away from Sky Mist City. If it's possible, you should move to the center. The battle of 100 years might not be the same as before, Su Ming said softly and lifted the door to the house before he walked out. The moment he took half a step out of the house, the old man's ancient voice came from behind him. There is no place in the world that is relatively safe, but similarly, there is no place that is relatively dangerous either. Does a plant have a choice? Su Ming paused for a moment. He did not quite understand the meaning behind the old man's words. In silence, Su Ming walked out of the house and out of the small tribe. As he looked at the clear sky, a complicated look appeared on Su Ming's face, but there was determination in his heart. He knew that he was about to face a disaster that had never appeared before in the land of South Morning. He also knew that there might be an innumerable amount of people who would die in this disaster. He could choose to run away and find a place to isolate himself and wait for the disaster to arrive. Perhaps then he could escape the danger. However, he could also choose not to run away. Instead, he could use the baptism of this natural disaster to make himself stronger. Normal cultivation would slow down in less than 10 years. If one wanted to live a better life and become stronger, then one must have a fearless heart. If there was no good fortune, then there would be good fortune through battle. If there was no good fortune, then there would be good fortune through slaughter. If there was a bottleneck in cultivation, then there would be blood to solve it. If there was a crisis in life and death, then there would be madness in life and death to create a path that belonged to oneself. There is no place in the world that is relatively safe, and neither is there a place that is relatively dangerous. Su Ming mumbled. The further he went, the more determined his footsteps became. Su Ming continued walking like this. He did not activate his speed, and neither did he circulate any of his cultivation base. He did not even circulate his chi. With just his body, he walked through the mountain range and the forest like a mortal. He walked toward the direction of Heavenly Mist City. His goal was Heavenly Mist City, but the goal in his heart was Dark Mountain. Even though he was walking on this path, Dark Mountain still appeared in his mind. As he walked on his way home, he walked through his memories as if he was searching for it. The rise and fall of the mountain range, the dampness in the forest, and the swamps did not make Su Ming stop for too long. 3 days passed by as he continued walking. In truth, If Su Ming used his full speed, he would only need a moment to cover this 3-day journey. But he had no choice. In the beginning, he had intentionally made himself forget his cultivation base and everything else, but slowly, as he walked through the mountains, forests, plains, and other places when he could no longer see any other people in this vast world, he gradually entered a state that was akin to forgetting everything else. He forgot his own cultivation base, forgot that he was walking in the land of South Morning, forgot his goal, and forgot many other things. When the 4th night arrived, Su Ming became tired as he walked through the forest. He leaned against a big tree in exhaustion and lifted his head to look at the night sky. He looked at the moon that was partially hidden behind the many leaves and brought out his sun. He placed the sun by his lips, closed his eyes, and blew into it softly. Yet even after a long time had passed, not a single sound came from the forest. There was a nostalgic look on Su Ming's face, as if he was immersed in the song of the sun in his memories. There were 3 people charging towards Su Ming from the direction of Sky Mist City at the edge of the forest. They were a distance away from where Su Ming was, but they were not too far away from him. The 3 people were moving forward cautiously. The person in the lead had his eyes closed, and there was an invisible layer of ripples spreading in a circular area of several thousands of feet around him. Once the ripples touched the big trees, some of them would bounce back, and only when they touched the small creatures in the forest would a large amount of them gather together. Under the moonlight, the picture of a bat could be seen on that person's face. That was not a berserker mark. It was a tattoo, the shaman's tattoo. One of the 2 people following behind that person was incredibly tall and built. He looked as if there was a great amount of power contained within him. His bulging muscles made him look like a small hill. With every single step he took, the ground would tremble, but strangely, not a single sound could be heard. That person carried a gigantic battle axe on his shoulder. The blade of the axe was dark red, and it was the mark left behind by dried blood. The other person was a short and thin figure. From the curve of her figure, it could be seen that she was a woman. Her appearance was ordinary. Her face was slightly dark, and her eyes were like lightning. Among the 3 of them, this woman was the one who moved the fastest. It was as if she had to slow down to maintain the same speed as the 3 of them. There was a poisonous fly tattooed on the woman's face, causing her to look ugly. The 3 of them charged forward, and before long, they stopped in the forest. At that moment, the 3 of them were only 50,000 feet away from Su Ming, but it was clear that the 3 of them had yet to notice Su Ming's existence. Su Ming was also immersed in the soundless song of the sun. The 3 of them did not know that there was a mortal enemy of theirs that would fight to the death once they ran into each other 50,000 feet away. This is the place. According to our promise, we have to wait for Wu Duo for 2 hours. Let's wait here. Ing Huan, you're the fastest. Patrol a circular area of 100,000 feet around this place, and make sure that it's safe. According to the map, there are no tribes here. The nearest tribe is also quite far away. There shouldn't be any berserkers here, but we still have to be careful. If Wu Duo doesn't come after 2 hours, then I'll leave. The woman among the 3 turned around and cast a glance at the person who spoke, then disappeared into the night. Wu Duo loves killing. If he doesn't come, then I'll leave as well. The man with the battle axe sat down by the side and cast a cold glance at the person with the bat tattoo on his face. Don't worry. He needs the shaman crystals we brought, so he'll definitely come. Once the trade is done, then the 3 of us won't have lost so many people to enter the land of berserkers. With his arts, we can turn into berserkers and avoid the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. The person with the bat tattoo on his face spoke in a low voice. When he mentioned the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands, his breathing clearly quickened. Seeking recommendation tickets. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 342. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to the people from your Shaman Bat tribe, or else we wouldn't have been able to escape from Sky Mist Barrier. The man placed his battle axe by the side and brought out some ointment to rub on his wounds. There were many bloody gashes on his body. "You're indeed ruthless. You sacrificed hundreds of your tribesmen for this chance." The man smiled. "If we don't enter the land of the berserkers during the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands, we'll definitely die. This is nothing compared to you feigning death to escape the disaster." The man with the bat tattoo on his face let out a cold harumph. "We should be the first batch of people who used this method to escape into the land of the berserkers. It's a pity. This method is very risky, and only 3 to 5 people can enter at most, or else we could have given this method to the god of Shaman's temple, and we'd have gotten a lot of rewards." The man frowned and avoided the topic just now. "It's useless even if we gave it to the god of Shaman's temple. Do you think they don't know about this method? Besides, with how terrifying and powerful Sky Mist City is, they must have known about this weakness a long time ago, but they still didn't seal it. The reason behind this is very profound." The man with the bat tattoo laughed coldly. "Oh, I thought Waduo was the first to find this method. He disappeared for 12 years and has been living in the land of the berserkers. I wonder what his level of cultivation is now." The man lowered his head, and a glint appeared in his eyes. As the two of them spoke, they would occasionally observe their surroundings cautiously. If there was even the slightest sign of trouble, they would immediately attack. After all, to them, this was the land of the berserkers. It could be said that everyone here was their enemy. With their power that was equivalent to the initial stage of the Spine Realm, they did not dare venture too deep into the land of the berserkers. They had already paid a huge price to enter this place. They could not return to the land of the shamans. Right now, they only wanted to find a small berserker tribe and hide their identities. Then, they would migrate with the tribe so that they would have a higher chance of surviving the disaster. They did not want to die in battle. At that moment, there was an afterimage that sliced through the air soundlessly about 20,000 feet away from them. This extreme speed was created by the woman who was patrolling outside the 3rd high school. She continued moving about, and gradually, she was less than 30,000 feet away from Su Ming. With her speed, even if she was patrolling in a circle, she would still find Su Ming in less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Once they discovered Su Ming, a berserker, then before they could hide the characteristics of the shamans, this would be a battle to the death. Su Ming leaned against the big tree and closed his eyes. There was a nostalgic look on his face as he held the bone sun in his hands and played a soundless song. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see faint circles of ripples around Su Ming. Those ripples spread out and echoed in a circular area of several hundreds of feet. The sun has a soul. That's why it has a song. The wind is blowing, but the sound of the soul will not disappear. Su Ming mumbled. He opened his eyes and looked at the bone sun in his hand. After a long, long time, he closed his eyes once again and immersed himself in the soundless song once again. Gradually, once he managed to forget everything along the way, he forgot about the bone sun in his hands under the big tree in the middle of the night. He also did not try to find out whether the sun could make a sound. Instead, he searched for the feeling of home within the song in his memories. The mark of Dark Mountain gradually appeared on his face. The grass and trees of Dark Mountain tribe gradually appeared on his chest under his robes. Snowflakes slowly fell from the sky around the tribe, causing his closed right eye to gradually turn red. The ripples around him became even stronger, causing the area of 100-something feet around Su Ming to distort. Even his presence seemed to have been hidden away. It was as if Su Ming no longer existed. He immersed himself in the song, immersed himself in his memories, leaning against the big tree and not moving. Time trickled by, and very soon, the time it takes for an incense stick to burn passed by. An afterimage flashed past 3,000 feet away from where Su Ming was and revealed a petite body. The female shaman appeared there, and once she swept her gaze across the area, she disappeared in a flash. Time passed by, and without Su Ming noticing it, the ripples around him started distorting like tidal waves. As they reverberated in the air, they started spreading out from the area of 100-something feet. Gradually, when they reached nearly 500 feet, suddenly, a moaning song from a sun appeared in the silence of the night. The sound of a sun was slightly weak in the beginning, like the first cry of a baby, but soon it gradually calmed down and turned into a moan that contained an endless amount of grief. It surrounded the area and traveled even further into the distance. Su Ming still had his eyes closed as he leaned against the big tree. He held the sun by his mouth and did not move. However, right at the moment the song of the sun was the first sound anyone could hear, a white storage bag tied to Su Ming's robes suddenly shone with a red light. That red light flew out, and as a large amount of distorted ripples appeared before Su Ming, the fire ape appeared. It crouched on the ground with a strange look in its eyes as it stared at Su Ming. In truth, the storage bag could not trap it. It could walk out at any moment. This was something Su Ming had promised it, which was why he had never sealed the bag tightly. At that moment, it was looking at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. The sorrowful song from the sun reached its ears, and once it heard it, it felt incredibly uncomfortable, so it crouched on the ground and listened to it quietly. The shadow under Su Ming's body under the moonlight also started swaying. A pair of red eyes appeared on the shadow's head, and within those eyes was confusion. Almost the moment the song of the sun traveled out from the void for the first time, the female shaman who had disappeared previously walked out from the air 2,000 feet away from the spot where Su Ming was. A wary look appeared on her face as she stared at the spot where Su Ming was, which was also the spot where the song of the sun came from. Killing intent appeared in her eyes, but she hesitated for a moment and did not act recklessly. Instead, she gradually retreated. The song from the sun spread out more and more until it echoed in a circular area of several thousands of feet. It did not disappear even after a long time had passed. In fact, the echoes of the song even spread further into the silent night. There was grief in the song, and there was a solemn air to it that could make all those who heard it feel their emotions rise and fall. It was as if the song contained some sort of strange power that could move souls. In the forest tens of thousands of feet away, the two shamans who had fallen into silence after their short conversation lifted their heads almost at the same time, and wariness appeared on their faces. Did you hear that? The muscular man tightened his grip around the battle axe in his hand, and killing intent appeared in his eyes. The sound of sun. The person with the bat tattoo on his face stood up, and a grave look appeared on his face. This is a dark night. To the Berserker tribe, this is a remote place. There aren't any Berserker tribes around here, and the sound of a sun suddenly appeared. At the same time, killing intent appeared in the man's eyes. Anxiety also appeared on his face. The man hesitated for a moment before he whispered, "Could it be Wu Duo?" Before the person with the bat tattoo on his face could speak, an aloof woman's voice traveled out from the forest beside him. "No, this person is a Berserker." The person who spoke was the female shaman who had been 2,000 feet away from Su Ming just now. She had already returned to the area. "What level of cultivation?" The person with the bat tattoo on his face immediately asked. "I can't sense a strong level of cultivation. Besides the song from the sun being a little strange, this person shouldn't have reached the bone sacrifice realm," the woman said coldly. "He's not in the bone sacrifice realm." The man with the battle axe let out a sigh of relief before he started laughing ferociously. However, the man with the bat tattoo on his face frowned and looked at the female shaman. "If he's not in the bone sacrifice realm, then why didn't you just kill him? This is the land of berserkers. If we're going to attack, then let's do it together. I won't attack alone." The woman's voice was still as cold as ever. "Wu Duo will be here soon. Come, let's attack together and get rid of this person as soon as possible. Also, once we kill him, we'll have to search around and see whether there are other berserkers around to avoid trouble." A glint appeared in the eyes of the man with the bat tattoo on his face, and he charged into the forest. The female shaman followed behind him. Her body was like wisps of smoke, and she looked rather ethereal. "Since he's not in the bone sacrifice realm, then let me skin him and see whether I can wear it." The muscular man licked his lips and a bloodthirsty and cruel look appeared on his face as he followed closely behind the woman. The three of them could be said to be incredibly cautious. Even if they were facing a person who had not reached the bone sacrifice realm, they would still attack at the same time. It was clear that they did not feel safe in the land of berserkers. Huan, you're skilled in speed. Attack first, but don't kill him. Leave him alive. There's something off about him. I have some questions I want to ask this berserker child. The man with the bat tattoo on his face whispered to the female shaman beside him as he charged forward. The three of them traveled incredibly quickly. Before long, they were already closing in on the distance of 50,000 feet as they traveled in a straight line. However, as they got closer, the moaning notes of the sun became clearer. In a quiet night, those notes made them feel incredibly uneasy. When Huan heard the man's words, she nodded. She also felt that there was something off about this berserker child. 3,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet, 500 feet, 300 feet. The three of them were like long arcs that stirred up piercing whistles. They traveled at full speed from 3,000 feet to appear 300 feet away from Su Ming. With just one glance, they saw Su Ming leaning against the tree without moving. They also saw a fiery red ape squatting in front of him. Almost the instant the three of them closed in, the fire ape turned around and bared its teeth as it looked at the three of them. At the same time, the woman who was skilled in speed charged forward. In the previous breath, she had been 300 feet away, but in the next breath, she had already appeared beside Su Ming. A chilling glare appeared in the woman's eyes. She lifted her right hand, and 5 black needles appeared in her hand, charging straight towards the top of Su Ming's skull. Yet almost the instant the woman lifted her right hand and was about to lower it, she suddenly let out a shrill scream of pain. Her body trembled, and she coughed out blood. Shock and disbelief appeared on her face. "What's behind me?" Extreme terror could be heard in the woman's shocked voice. Her body started withering away right before her eyes, as if her flesh and blood were being devoured in an instant. The man with the battle axe widened his eyes in terror. The person with the bat by his side sucked in a sharp breath. He could clearly see a dark shadow sticking close to Huan's back like a piece of skin. It was spreading out rapidly, as if it wanted to envelop the woman's entire body. This is the first time He Feng has shown his prowess. Please recommend him. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 343. This strange sight caused the male shaman with the bat tattoo on his face to be shocked. He had never seen such a strange art before, and he did not even know what that black shadow was. All of this happened too quickly. He only saw the black shadow appear behind Huan the instant she closed in on the young man who was leaning against the tree and playing the sun. It closed in on her without a single sound, and soon after, Huan let out a shrill scream of pain. The man holding the battle axe by her side came to an abrupt halt. His heart pounded against his chest. The things that happened before his eyes made his skin crawl, just like his companions. Almost the instant the female shaman let out a shrill scream, the black shadow behind her spread out and covered her entire body like a gaping mouth. Just like that, the female shaman was completely devoured by the black shadow. But that was not all. Once the female shaman was devoured by the black shadow in the area filled with the ripples of the sun, the fiery red ape crouched down in front of the young man leaning against the tree, and a murderous look appeared in its eyes. The shamans had not paid any attention to the ape previously, but at that moment, as it revealed its murderous aura, a bloody stench came crashing into their faces. The ape moved and turned into a fiery red that charged towards the man with the bat tattoo on his face. It was so quick that it closed in on the man in an instant. As the fire ape swiped at him, the pupils of the man with the bat tattoo shrank. As his body tumbled backwards, he coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. His chest was a bloody mess, and shock filled his face. As he retreated, he let out a piercing howl, and his entire body instantly turned into fog. Only then did he manage to avoid the fire ape's fatal blow. Meng Hung, Hurry up and kill that berserker." A piercing voice tumbled out of the shaman who had turned into fog. As he tumbled backwards, the fire ape chased after him with a ferocious expression. The person called Meng Hung was the strong man with the battle axe. He did not hesitate. He knew that this was the land of berserkers, and every step he took was filled with danger. If he still cared about his own safety, then once the other two died, it would be difficult for him to live in peace. It was better for him to take a gamble. This battle was something the three shamans did not expect at all. They had originally thought that it would be a simple fight, and that their opponent was just a transcended berserker who had not even reached the bone sacrifice realm. Yet at that moment, before their opponent could even attack, without even moving, one of them had already been devoured by the black shadow in a bizarre manner, and the other was being chased by the ape. The situation was incredibly perilous. Just what is this person's status in the land of berserkers? As the burly man growled, he took a huge step forward with his battle axe in hand and charged towards Su Ming like a whirlwind. He must have an incredibly high status among the berserkers, or else how could he possess a priceless treasure that could devour Huan and a ferocious beast that could fight against the bat halberds when he's not even in the bone sacrifice realm? This person's real body must be incredibly weak and cannot even withstand a single blow. Fu Go asked me to kill this person because he saw this. Once he dies, his treasure will be ours. A murderous glint appeared in the man's eyes. He moved incredibly quickly, and with just one step, he had already closed in on Su Ming, who was sitting by the tree and playing his sun, as if he was completely unaware of what was happening around him. Die for this, daddy. A strange shade of green appeared on the man's entire body. As that shade of green shone, his lifted right hand swelled up, and the battle axe also let out a bloody stench. The axe sliced through the air and charged towards Su Ming's head. Not too far away, a scream of pain reverberated in the air from the fog that the fire ape had caught up to and torn apart a few times. It fled even faster, and the male shaman who had turned into fog also saw the axe swinging down on Su Ming as he rapidly retreated. "Kill him!" The male shaman roared loudly and retreated once again. The strong man laughed ferociously. He had used all his strength in that axe swing. He was confident that even if he ran into a berserker in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm, if the young man before him did not dodge and simply allowed himself to be cut down, he would definitely die. Yet right when the male shaman who had turned into fog was filled with anticipation and the burly man was filled with ferociousness, as if he could already see Su Ming's body being cut in half, Su Ming still did not move. However, the black bracelet on his right wrist dissipated at that moment and fell off his wrist. With a surge of black fog, it turned into a woman's figure that appeared before Su Ming and the man. She lifted her right hand and went up against the axe swinging down on her. The woman appeared too quickly, almost in an instant. Her entire body was black, and her face could not be seen. Only her curvaceous body could be seen. As she lifted her hand and clashed with the axe swinging down, a violent boom reverberated in the air. The man holding the axe shuddered, and his right hand exploded, causing the axe to tumble backwards with a hum and turn into an arc that charged into the forest in the distance. As for the man, blood mist burst out of his body as he trembled. He staggered backwards and coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. His face turned pale, and without any hesitation, he retreated with shock in his eyes. He was not the only one who was shocked. The male shaman who had turned into fog was also shocked. As he continued retreating, the fire ape that had been chasing after him came to an abrupt halt. This distance was the limit of the chain on the fire ape's neck. It could not continue forward. As it bared its teeth, the ape let out a low growl and moved back slowly. Using that chance, the male shaman's body turned from fog back into flesh and blood once again. His breathing quickened and fear lingered in his heart. But when he saw Meng Hung coughing out blood and swiftly retreating, his breathing froze for a moment. The female figure formed by the black mist stood before Su Ming and glared at the two shamans coldly. She did not speak, but her gaze alone was enough to make the two people's hearts tremble. Middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm. The instant the male shaman with the bat tattoo on his face met the female figure in the black mist, a loud bang rang out in his head. The muscular man's right hand exploded and was reduced to a bloody mess. As he retreated, he ran in a different direction from a male shaman with the bat tattoo on his face. He did not dare go towards the male shaman because the fire ape was there. Between the two of them was Su Ming, who had his eyes closed and was leaning against a tree. The short battle fell into silence. The fire ape crouched on the tree and swept its cold gaze at the two people. The female figure in the black mist did the same. He has a priceless treasure that can devour Ing Huan, an ape with a speed that's equivalent to a berserker in the bone sacrifice realm, and a spirit slave in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm protecting him. How could this person be so powerful? He's just a berserker in the transcendence realm. The male shaman with the bat tattoo on his face was pale. He knew that he had no chance of winning this battle and was just about to retreat. The muscular shaman in the other direction was also filled with fear. The dangers of this battle made him lose his will to continue fighting. All he wanted to do now was to leave this place as soon as possible. He had gone through a lot of trouble to escape to the land of the berserkers, and he did not want to die here. The young man leaning against the tree with his eyes closed was filled with a strange air of mystery to the muscular shaman. He did not want to get close to that mystery. He wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Yet right at the moment he and the shaman with the bat tattoo on his face began to shrink back and were about to flee in two different directions, their bodies suddenly froze. They saw in shock that right before Su Ming, right behind the fire ape, was a person gradually appearing out of thin air at the spot where Ing Huan had been devoured. That person had a curvaceous body, but she was slightly petite. There was a tattoo on her face, causing her face to look ugly. That woman was the shaman Ing Huan. She had reappeared. However, her eyes were originally lifeless, but within an instant, a brilliant light appeared in them. She stood there and lowered her head to look at her body. Right under the stunned gazes of the other two shamans, she swayed her body. By the looks of it, she was not used to this body and needed some time to get used to it. She's not Ing Huan. The male shaman with the bat tattoo on his face instantly turned stark white. He could clearly see a cold and unfamiliar look in Ing Huan's eyes when she reappeared. The muscular shaman also noticed this. Terror appeared in his eyes, and without a hint of hesitation, he quickly retreated. Almost the instant he retreated, the shaman with the bat tattoo on his face also retreated. The two of them ran in completely different directions, but the moment they took a step forward, a dark smile appeared on Ing Huan's lips as she walked out once again. With one move, she charged towards the person with the bat tattoo on his face. The black figure that was given to Su Ming by his eldest senior brother also moved at that moment and turned into a wisp of black smoke that charged towards the muscular shaman. Only the fire ape let go of the chain on its neck and let out a displeased growl before it stopped around Su Ming. Before long, a figure that looked like a wisp of smoke floated out from the forest beside Su Ming. Once a head fell out from the wisp of smoke charged towards Su Ming's right hand and turned into a black bracelet. Before long, a muffled scream of pain reverberated in the air. After a moment, a man walked out from the other side of the forest. That person was Fu Gu, the shaman who had fled just now. As he walked over, he swayed his body as if he was getting used to his new surroundings. In his right hand was a human head, and that head belonged to Ing Huan. His eyes sparkled, and he stopped 100-something feet away from Su Ming. His gaze fell on Su Ming, and a murderous glint could be seen in his eyes. It was as if he was hesitating and hesitating. Killing intent shone in his eyes, as if he was continuously observing him. Blood dripped from the human head in his hand onto the ground, letting out slapping sounds that were incredibly clear in the quiet night. Almost the instant he stopped, the fire ape turned around and glared at Fu Gu, who looked like a shaman. It bared its teeth and let out a low growl. It could sense that this person before it might have a different form, but he was still the shadow that it hated so much. The hostile look in this person's eyes made the fire ape's growls even more murderous. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 344. The bat tattoo on the face of the man who looked like Fu Ge from the shaman tribe was originally dull, but at that moment, there was a dark light shining on it. He lifted his foot slowly and took a light step towards Su Ming's direction. The instant it took that step, the fire ape suddenly stood up and raised its hands at Fu Ge. It pounded its chest, and a crazed look appeared in its eyes. If Fu Ge took another step forward and entered its range, it would immediately charge out. The man who looked like Fu Ge was not bothered by the fire ape. He continued staring at Su Ming, who had his eyes closed. He lifted his right foot, but hesitation appeared in his eyes once again. As he hesitated, he stared at Su Ming with a bright gaze, as if he wanted to see whether there was anything off about him. After a long while, killing intent appeared in his eyes, and just as he was about to land his foot on the ground, a loud bang rang out. "He Feng, are you tired of living?" A calm voice suddenly echoed in the air. The moment that voice appeared, the killing intent in Fu Ji's eyes disappeared. With a light shudder, he instantly knelt down on one knee on the ground. He saw Su Ming, who was sitting under the big tree, opening his eyes. He had already put down the sun in his hands and was looking at him coldly. What was even stranger was that even though Su Ming was no longer playing that song, there was still a soft, moaning song reverberating in the air around them. "Master, you misunderstood me. I just want to return to your side." He Feng's heart trembled, and he quickly lowered his head. He looked as if he was acting normally, but because of Su Ming's words and gaze, a violent wave of emotions had appeared in his heart. Su Ming did not speak. He only looked at the body that looked like a shaman, but was in truth He Feng's body. This was the first time he saw He Feng's divine ability. That divine ability was incredibly strange, and it made Su Ming slightly apprehensive. He Feng was rebellious. Su Ming knew this since a long time ago. This person was not willing to be used by him. That was why he had second thoughts. If Su Ming wanted to use this or a person well, then he had to be extremely forceful and suppress him forever. He had to make his fear take over everything. Only then could he control him. Using fear to control. Su Ming closed his eyes. The moment he did so, He Feng, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly started trembling furiously. As he trembled, He Feng let out a shrill scream of pain. That scream was filled with extreme pain, as if he was enduring an unimaginable pain. Pain screams rang out nonstop. As He Feng trembled, he could not even stabilize his body. He fell to the side, and as he twitched, the body he had just obtained started withering and rotting at a speed visible to the naked eye. It could be clearly seen that as it continued to rot and wither, a large amount of black gas was growing on its skin. Countless wings of the moon were faintly discernible within the black gas, and they were frantically devouring it. This sudden change did not surprise He Feng. He was incredibly intelligent. From the moment Su Ming said those words, he knew that he would definitely be punished. However, he was completely unbothered by this punishment. In his mind, Su Ming would definitely not kill him, and even if he did, he would not do it now. After all, the current him would be of great help to Su Ming during the Battle of Sky Mist. He did not believe that Su Ming would dare to kill him. It's just a slight punishment. He just wants me to know that he's my master so that I won't have any rebellious thoughts. Master, you're still too naive based on these childish methods. You may have changed a lot over the years, but compared to me, you're still not as good as me. I only need to pretend to be in pain so that you'll be happy and at ease when you see it. Then I'll make some promises, and it'll be enough to fool you. This is just a show. I'll put on an act with you. He Feng laughed coldly in his heart, but on the surface, he let out shrill screams of pain and begged for mercy. He Feng might have rebellious thoughts, but the wings of the moon did not. To the souls of the wings of the moon, Su Ming was their king. His will was their everything. With just one thought from Su Ming, He could make them willingly self-destruct even if their souls were to do so. Because of that, even if Feng, who had fused with the wings of the moon, opened up his mind and became the main body after he fused with them, everything he had came from the wings of the moon. That was why Feng, who had never been punished before, underestimated that sort of pain. As the body he had just obtained continued trembling and screaming, Feng experienced two different types of pain in his body and his soul. He could feel his body rotting away, and he could feel the pain of his soul being torn apart. He could also feel the indescribable pain of his body and soul being devoured by the wings of the moon. Damn it, why does it hurt so much? Su Ming, you bastard. Once I regain my freedom, the first thing I'll do is devour you. Remember this. Feng roared in his heart, but there was pain on his face, and his cries became even more wretched. Master, I was wrong. I was wrong. Spare me this time. Spare me this time. Feng's body convulsed, and his cries of pain caused even the fire ape's eyes to change. His cries continued echoing in the air, intersecting with the moaning of the sun. Master, I won't do it again. Ah, Master, spare me, spare me. The body Feng had just obtained had completely withered away and turned into a dried-up corpse. His flesh and blood had completely rotted away. Black mist seeped out of the corpse and tumbled about in midair like fog. Occasionally, the wings of the moon would appear within it, and the shrill cries of pain came from within the fog. Su Ming had his eyes closed, as if he did not hear it. He did not care about it all. As time passed by, Feng's cries of pain reached their peak and slowly became weaker. Su Ming, I won't let you go. Master, spare me. Su Ming, I'll return the pain I suffered today 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times over. You won't kill me. I know this very well. Master, I was wrong. Feng was really wrong. Please spare me this time. Just this once. Just this once. There were two different changes in Feng's heart and words. Yet, gradually, the curses in his heart gradually lessened, and his pleas grew louder, because Feng was slowly discovering something that terrified him. Wisps continuously floated out of the ball of black smoke that floated in midair. Once each wisp separated, it would turn into a wing of the moon and linger around the area. Gradually, the amount of black smoke decreased, and in the end, there was only one wisp left. Within that wisp of black smoke was Feng's trembling soul. Master, spare me. Feng's soul seemed to be about to dissipate. As the black mist was continuously drawn out of his body, he became weaker, but this was not the main reason why he was terrified. He would occasionally lift his head and look at the sky. His pleas grew more anxious, and he no longer had the mood to curse in his heart. At this moment, the sky was already beginning to brighten. In the distance, the sun had already begun to emit some rays of light. It wouldn't be long before it would appear. Once that happened, the darkness of the earth would be dispelled and a new day would arrive. To Su Ming, this was a new day, but to Feng, this would be the final moment of his death. He was originally not afraid of daylight. Once he fused with the wings of the moon, he could still move about freely even during the day. As long as there was a shadow, it could exist. Yet now, as he was being punished by Su Ming and the wings of the moon that had fused with his body were forcefully taken away by Su Ming's will, as he lost the wings of the moon in his body, he suddenly realized that for some unknown reason, he had an endless amount of fear towards sunlight. He even had a feeling that if he was still in this state when the morning sun rose and the wings of the moon had not returned to his body, then what awaited him would be complete and utter death. This was something he had never thought of before. This surpassed his expectations. As time passed by and the morning sun could rise at any moment, Feng's fear reached its peak. He suddenly realized that he had made a huge mistake in his judgment. He wants to kill me. He actually wants to kill me. Extreme terror appeared on Feng's face. He was afraid, truly afraid. Impossible. He's just trying to scare me. He definitely wouldn't go through so much trouble to make me fuse with the wings of the moon. Now that I've made such a small mistake, he's going to kill me. This is a warning. That's right, this is a warning. Feng continued comforting himself, but his eyes were still fixed on the land in the distance. At the instant he looked over, the first rays of the morning sun suddenly appeared in the distance. At the same time, the darkness on the ground started disappearing in a shocking manner, and the darkness that enveloped the forest where Su Ming was disappeared in the span of a breath. He Feng was terrified. It had been a long time since he had experienced this sort of fear. He had only experienced it when he was captured by Su Ming in the past. He had originally forgotten about it, but now he suddenly remembered that time. He had judged that Su Ming would not kill him, but in truth, if it was not because of his final words that moved him, he would have died a long time ago. He really wants to kill me, He Feng screamed. As the darkness disappeared and sunlight shone on the land, He Feng's body rapidly dissipated. During the process, he went through a pain that was much more intense than what he had gone through in the past. The feeling of death rose abruptly within him. Master, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I was really wrong. Spare me. Spare me just this once, Master. He Feng let out shrill screams of pain. This time he was not faking it. He was truly begging for mercy. Yet his begging did not make Su Ming open his eyes. He Feng had already fallen into despair. He could feel that his body was about to disappear, his soul was about to scatter, and from then on, he would no longer exist. A deep wave of fear and regret filled his entire body. As he screamed, most of his body disappeared. Just as his head was about to disappear as well, he suddenly remembered how he had avoided the disaster of life and death in the past. Master, I don't want freedom. I'm willing to follow you forever. I was wrong, and this is my punishment. You don't want freedom? Su Ming opened his eyes. I'll give you freedom, but not for 500 years. I'll double it. You'll only be free after 1,000 years, Su Ming said slowly. The moment he spoke, He Feng suddenly realized that the Su Ming before him seemed to have become different. The recommendation board has become very strange. It's very difficult for the same votes to obtain the same rank as before. I don't care why it's strange. I just hope that all my fellow Taoists will work harder so that I won't pay too much attention to it and can focus on creating my work. My fellow Taoists, please come to Qi Dian website and give me your precious recommendation votes. I will wrap my fist in my palm and bow to you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qi Dian website and give me recommendation votes or monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 345. Su Ming's calm words contained a chill that made He Feng shiver. As Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at He Feng, the wings of the moon that were circling around He Feng immediately let out piercing screeches and charged towards He Feng. Once they enveloped him in multiple layers, they caused He Feng to not completely disappear when the sun rose completely. The fusion of the wings of the moon made He Feng feel as if he had just escaped death. His fear towards Su Ming took over his heart, and he felt that he could not figure out Su Ming's will. His way of thinking was completely different from what he believed to be common sense. Just like today, he originally thought that Su Ming would not really kill him no matter what. In truth, he did not die, but He Feng knew that if he had spoken just a little bit slower, then what awaited him would have been death. He Feng had a very wild nature, and he was unwilling to become someone else's slave. At that moment, fear had taken over most of his heart, but slowly, as his fear lessened, he might even show signs of turning on him. Yet for now, he did not dare to do so. Before he found a way to avoid the threat of sunlight, he did not dare to recklessly kill him again. This was something Su Ming knew very well. He did indeed not want to kill He Feng just like that. After all, his power was strange, and he could be of great use in Sky Mist Shaman Hunt. Su Ming had his own plans for this sort of person turning on him. He Feng, who had once again fused with the wings of the moon, turned into a shadow. Once he bowed towards Su Ming with lingering fear in his heart, he obediently fused into Su Ming's shadow. There were two bloody human heads on the ground, along with a dried-up corpse. When the fire ape saw that Su Ming had woken up, it yawned by the side and picked up the burly shaman's head, fiddling with it in its hands. If anyone else saw this, they would definitely be shocked. The sounds of the sun around Su Ming gradually disappeared as the sun rose into the sky and light covered the land. He looked at the blue sky and took a deep breath, then slowly stood up from where he had been sitting for the entire night. When he stood up, cracking sounds came from within Su Ming's body. That sound sounded like bones crashing against each other, like flesh and blood rubbing against each other. As the sounds echoed in the air, the mountain mark appeared on Su Ming's face. Dark mountain tribe manifested under his robes. Snow fell from the sky, and his right eye also turned red. The entire snow picture of Blood Moon and Dark Mountain was completely revealed. Light shone on it, and there seemed to be a faint song of the sun echoing in the air. It was as if the song of the sun existed within Su Ming's berserker mark, and when his berserker mark was completely revealed, it would naturally float out. Su Ming's hair moved without wind. He stood on the ground and lifted his head. Slowly, his feet floated up until they were 3 feet off the ground. A powerful presence erupted forth from within Su Ming's body. Before the auction, when his first change of heart ended, he had already reached the later stage of the Transcendence realm. He was only 1 step away from attaining great completion. Su Ming had already understood at that time that he needed the Sun Song. He needed to play the song in his memories. If he could do this, then his Dark Mountain Berserker mark would completely fuse with his memories, causing the waves of his Berserker mark to tremble and allow his power to reach the great completion of the Transcendence realm from the later stage of the Transcendence realm. Ever since the auction, Su Ming had walked all the way until he retrieved the repaired sun. He had walked for 3 days, and only on the 4th night did he manage to slowly play the true song of the sun on that quiet night, the night of slaughter and the night of blood, causing the sun to gain a soul. That soul was formed from Su Ming's memories. This soul was the soul of his Berserker mark. The presence within Su Ming's body became stronger. After a moment, the ground within a circular area of several thousands of feet started trembling. The trees rustled, and it was as if there was a violent gust of wind blowing in the air. Su Ming's body floated several dozens of feet above the ground. A brilliant light appeared in his eyes, and he felt as if he was in control of power. The great completion of the Transcendence realm and the later stage of the Transcendence realm might seem like there was only one realm between them, but in truth, great completion was the pinnacle of the Transcendence realm. It was also the strongest realm within the Transcendence realm. Those who reached this realm could be known as those who had attained great completion in the Transcendence realm. They could also be known as secondary bone berserkers, because there is only a piece of paper separating them from the Berserker tribe's bone sacrifice realm. If it was broken, then it would be broken with just 1 poke. If it was not broken, then time would not be able to weaken it. Su Ming descended slowly from midair. The moment his feet landed on the ground, his hair slowly fell on his shoulders. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them after a moment, his eyes were calm. This is the 5th morning. There are still 2 more days. There's not enough time for me to reach Sky Mist Barrier from here. When Su Ming closed his eyes just now, besides calming down the ripples of his power, he had also sensed the location of the brand of his life force. He could vaguely sense the location of the brand, and he could roughly tell how far away they were from him. If that's the case, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He picked up the female shaman's head and threw it to the fire ape. The fire ape leaped up, and once it caught the heads, it beamed with joy. It picked up the 2 heads by their long hair and tied them around its waist, then patted its chest towards Su Ming, putting on a strong front. Su Ming then walked towards the mummy with the bat tattoo on its face and cut down on its shriveled neck with his right hand. Cracking sounds rang out, but before Su Ming could pick up the person's head, the fire ape could not help but run over and grab the person's head, causing the shaman's body and head to be separated. Not a single drop of blood flowed out from the cut. The fire ape became even more pleased with itself. It quickly tied the 3rd head to its waist and swung it around a few times, its face becoming even more excited. Su Ming did not lift his head, but stared at the headless corpse before him. Once he patted the body, he brought out a bag made of grass. The bag looked incredibly broken, but when Su Ming held it in his hand, he discovered that it had the same function as a storage bag. He scanned it with his divine sense, and like a hot knife cutting through butter, he left his brand on the bag. Su Ming turned the bag upside down on his palm, and a stone the size of a fingernail fell out. That stone shone with 5 different colors under the sun. There seemed to be wisps of smoke surrounding it, making it look incredibly beautiful. There were close to 100 such stones in the straw sack. Besides them, there were also some herbs Su Ming had never seen before. There were also quite a lot of them. Su Ming put the bag into his bosom and stood up. With one move, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was in the forest not too far away, right in front of a headless corpse. Su Ming searched the corpse for a while and frowned. Once he got up, he disappeared once again. This time, when he reappeared, he was in another direction, beside the shaman Ing Huan. Once he searched around, he still did not find the bag. A barely noticeable glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Once he got up, he walked into the forest. The fire ape followed behind him. It had found a gigantic battle axe from somewhere and placed it on its shoulder. The battle axe was very heavy, but the fire ape was born with great strength, so it did not find it heavy at all. Su Ming looked at it, and a smile appeared on his face. "Xiao Hong," Su Ming called out gently. The fire ape lifted its head and rolled its eyes at Su Ming, then ignored him. Su Ming smiled and charged forward. The fire ape quickly followed behind him, and a competitive look appeared on its face. It was clear that it was still not willing to accept that it had lost to Su Ming in terms of speed. The man and the ape charged forward. 2 hours later, they left the forest and appeared on a vast plain. The grass rustled in the wind. Some of the wild flowers bloomed and let out a faint fragrance, causing this desolate and uninhabited place to be filled with a beauty that no one could appreciate. "What do you think of this place?" Su Ming stopped and stood on the plain. He spoke languidly, and his voice echoed in the area. The fire ape looked around and thought that Su Ming was talking to it, so it rolled its eyes again. "Sir, you've been following me all the way here, but you've remained silent. Could it be that you're not ready to attack?" Su Ming turned around and looked into the distance with bright eyes. The fire ape was momentarily stunned, then immediately looked over. As the wind swept through the grass, a thin and frail person slowly appeared on the meadow. He walked towards Su Ming and stopped several hundreds of feet away from him. He was a thin and tall person. He wore a long black robe and looked to be in his 30s. His gaze was profound, and his hair was braided into many small braids that fell behind his head. He stared at Su Ming with a grave expression. Su Ming was also looking at him. Their gazes met, even though they were several hundreds of feet apart. Western Sea Clan's Wu Duo. After a long while, the man lifted his right hand, and a dark blue plate appeared on his palm. He threw it towards Su Ming. The plate turned into a dark blue line that charged towards Su Ming, but he took a few steps back and simply allowed the plate to fall on the ground. He did not touch it. When he saw Su Ming's actions, the man's pupils shrank in a barely noticeable manner. "Dark Mountain Tribes, Imo, Su," Su Ming said calmly. "I don't care which clan you're from, but you took away my spoils of war. You'll have to give me an explanation for this." Su Ming looked at the man. He could tell that this person had not reached the bone sacrifice realm and had attained great completion in the awakening realm, just like him. However, the feeling this person gave Su Ming was as if he had run into a lone wolf. His aura far surpassed that of the 3 shamans who were equivalent to those in the bone sacrifice realm. When he heard Su Ming's words, the man fell silent. He did not speak. He had the same feeling as Su Ming. To him, Su might only have attained great completion in the awakening realm, and he had just reached it, but he made him feel as if he was being watched by needles. This was especially so since this person could tell that he was following him in secret. This made him not want to act recklessly. Besides, he knew that Su's level of cultivation was definitely not the only thing that mattered to him. As for Dark Mountain Tribe, he had also never heard of them before. This person must have made them up. "Perhaps this is why you followed me," Su Ming said slowly. He lifted his right hand, and a colorful crystal the size of a fingernail appeared on his palm. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 346. The moment he saw the crystal, the man suddenly smiled. That's right, I came here for this. It's a pity those two useless shamans didn't have it on them, but since you got it, it'll naturally belong to you. Judging by the direction you're heading, you should be heading to Sky Mist City. If that's the case, then I'll be going the same way as you. Wu Duo wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming. No need. Su Ming cast a glance at Wu Duo, then turned around to leave. He could sense that this person was very dangerous, and he did not want to waste too much time before the battle against Sky Mist. Of course, if this person decided to attack, then Su Ming would not mind seeing just how much power he possessed. Wu Duo took a few steps forward and immediately called out, "Brother Mo, please wait." Su Ming's footsteps faltered, and a freezing glare appeared in his eyes. Wu Duo's expression remained the same, as if he did not see the freezing glare in Su Ming's eyes as he spoke with a smile. "Brother Mo, don't misunderstand. I just have a trade with you. You'll definitely be interested." Su Ming did not speak. He only looked at Wu Duo coldly. "Brother Mo, you're going to Sky Mist City alone this time. If you can bring some credit with you, then once you enter Sky Mist City, your ranking will be much higher. I have a credit that I need your help with. Once it's done, I guarantee that you'll get enough credit so that even Sky Mist City will look at you in a different light." Wu Duo licked his lips and spoke languidly. "Speak." Su Ming's face was calm. "Haha, Brother Mo, you're very decisive. I admire this, then I won't waste my breath. I have a secret report. During the Battle of Sky Mist City, some shamans used other methods to sneak into the land of the Berserkers, while Sky Mist City was too busy to deal with them. The 3 shamans you met previously were the first batch. There should be some Berserkers who escaped into the land of the Berserkers behind them. If we work together and kill all these people on their way, then we'll bring their heads to Sky Mist City. It'll definitely be a great credit. Brother Mo, what do you think?" Wu Duo smiled and asked Su Ming. "Those who can avoid the protection of Sky Mist City and escape into the land of the Berserkers cannot be weak. If there are only a few of them, then the credit won't be great. If there are a lot of them, then even if we work together, it'll still be difficult for us to kill them. More importantly, how did you know about this?" Su Ming's voice was cold as he spoke slowly. "Brother Mo, you might not know this, but this flaw in Sky Mist City isn't really a flaw. Only fledgling shamans and below can pass through it. If you're medial shaman, it'll be difficult for you to enter because your level of cultivation is too high. Most importantly, passing through this flaw required a large amount of flesh and blood. Usually, only those who were prepared during battle would have a chance to pass through. There won't be many people like this, or else it wouldn't be a secret. I have a secret report that there are less than 20 people who have entered the land of Berserkers and are moving about in the area, and the strongest among them is only a fledgling shaman in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm. Brother Mo, please do not ask me about how I came to know about this. This is my secret," Wu Duo said in a low voice as he looked at Su Ming. "I won't hide this from you, Brother Mo. Once we kill these people, the credit for killing their corpses will belong to you, but the items on their bodies will belong to me. Also, as a form of thanks, once we're done, I can tell you about the use of the crystals. After all, we'll have plenty of chances to obtain them during the Battle of Sky Mist. This is our first time working together. If it goes well, then we can continue working together in the future. If you still don't trust me, then I can attack first every single time. If that's the case, then you'll naturally be able to make your choice," Wu Duo said in a low voice. Su Ming fell silent. If this mysterious Wu Duo was talking about another deal, then Su Ming would not have been too interested. However, this matter of hunting down shamans would become the perfect explanation for why Su Ming did not have enough time to go to Sky Mist City. What is a fledgling shaman? What is a medial shaman? Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he suddenly asked. Wu Duo was momentarily stunned and looked at Su Ming in surprise. "Brother Mo, you don't know? Oh well, This isn't a secret anyway. Your clan or tribe might have forgotten to tell you. A thought appeared in Wu Duo's head. He could not quite tell where Su Ming came from. If it was some of the bigger tribes, they would definitely know about the ranks of the shaman tribe, but Su Ming did not seem like he came from small tribe. Could it be that he's testing me? Wu Duo thought in his heart, but his expression remained the same. He smiled and spoke. The shaman tribe is different from the berserker tribe. You can even say that they're completely different. The berserker tribe divides their levels of cultivation in a trapezoid manner. There are 4 great realms: blood solidification, transcendence, bone sacrifice, and berserker soul. Each realm is divided into 4 small stages: beginner, middle, later, and completion. But the shaman tribe is different. The levels of cultivation in the shaman tribe are rather chaotic, but it can also be said to be rather simple. They have 6 great realms: battle shaman, spirit intellect, thought soothsayer, soul catcher, spirit medium, and split dawn. In truth, there are very few differences between these 6 realms. You can see them as the 6 paths each shaman will take after their coming-of-age ceremony. The patriarch of the tribe will test them to find the most suitable path for them to continue training. Each of the 6 realms was divided into 4 levels: beginner, middle, late, and end. A fledgling shaman is equivalent to those in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm. A medial shaman is equivalent to those who have attained great completion in the bone sacrifice realm. A latter shaman is equivalent to those in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm, and an end shaman is equivalent to those who have attained great completion in the berserker soul realm. Above the realm of despair, in reality, there was still a legendary realm, and that was emptiness. Within the 6 great realms, if there was someone who surpassed the realm of despair, then that person would be known as Sorcerer Emptiness. However, the difficulty of Kong appearing is second only to the god of berserkers appearing in the land of berserkers. Wu Duo smiled faintly and explained in detail. Battle wizard, intellect, thought foresight, soul catcher, spirit medium, split dawn. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. This was the first time he heard of the shaman tribe's ranking system. It was completely different from the berserker tribe. He had seen the split dawn and the spirit mediums among the 6 major categories, but he did not know which category the patriarch of the lizard shaman tribe belonged to. If you say it's simple, it's because of the 4 levels: beginner, middle, late, and end. If you say it's chaotic, it's because each of the 6 categories is different. Among them, battle shamans are warriors of the shaman tribe. They are the most common type of shaman. They use the power of their physical bodies and the sense of their tattoos as if they were offering sacrifices to obtain great power. Intellect is the combination of power and intelligence. They can control other people's fates. Intellect is very unique among the shaman tribe. The patriarch of each tribe practices intellect. His intelligence is supreme, and he can summon the wind and rain, forcing the people in his tribe to offer sacrifices to their god with their lives. When Wu Duo spoke up to this point, even his voice became much softer, as if he was incredibly wary of shamans like intellect. When Su Ming heard this, a thought appeared in his head. He remembered the patriarch of the lizard shaman tribe. His strength was so great that he was one of the few powerful shamans he had ever faced in his life. Thought soothsayers use the most handsome man or woman in their tribe as the target to train their ability to sense things. They will be able to predict the weather, be able to control the terrain, and be familiar with people. Powerful thought soothsayers can reach a terrifying state where the people will emit the elements of the earth, the sky will emit the sky, and the sky will emit the people. Soul catchers are skilled in casting the Red Death spell. They're spells that can bring people back from the dead and allow them to live forever. Do not look them in the eye. They are as powerful as the candle dragon. I've only killed 2 fledgling soul catchers before. Fighting against them is a nightmare. When Wu Duo spoke up to this point, he fell silent for a moment. Spirit mediums are given to the souls of the dead and the living. They are especially sympathetic towards the dead, but they do not care about the lives of the living. A spirit medium alone might not be strong, but if a powerful spirit medium works together with a soul catcher, then their combination will be a disaster for the living. The last is the split dawns. They are incredibly beautiful and rare. The shaman tribe has to pour a lot of effort into training each pair of split dawns. They have transcended nature and reality. It is said that they can imagine anything they want, and it will become reality. I hate this type of shaman, but in truth, it is the hardest for a shaman to appear in this type of realm. Once a split dawn appears in the shaman realm, then it will be the same as a new god of berserkers appearing in the berserker tribe, or perhaps even stronger. This is the shaman tribe. Brother Emo, the more you understand about them, the higher your chances of surviving the battle of Sky Mist will be. Then now, do we have the chance to work together? Wu Duo licked his lips and looked at Su Ming. Since you're so confident, then you must be able to find them. Lead the way. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he spoke resolutely. Brother Emo, you're a straightforward person. I can indeed find them, but I can't tell you the reason. But don't worry, I'm sincere in working together with you. Wu Duo laughed and stepped into the air, turning into a long arc that charged into the distance. Brother Emo, the closest batch of shamans is not too far away from us. Once I attack, please help me. Su Ming got up and moved behind Wu Duo. Without batting an eyelid, he turned into a long arc and sliced through the sky with him. On the other side of the plains where the two of them were sitting were two shamans who were cautiously charging forward while sticking close to the grass. One of them wore a leather helmet with bull horns on it. His eyes were ghastly, and there was a scar on his lips that made it seem as if his lips had been split into four. It was a terrifying sight. By his side was a boy. That boy's hair danced in the wind, and his eyes remained closed. However, there was a ghastly presence surrounding him, causing the man to occasionally look at him with unease and respect. You're afraid. As the two of them moved forward, the boy who had his eyes closed suddenly spoke. His voice was slightly piercing, and it sounded as if it was scraping against their souls. Sir Soul Catcher. The man by his side shuddered. Don't be afraid. That Wu Duo won't dare try anything funny. Once the deal is done, he will become your companion and follow me. He'll have an immortal shaman body. A smile appeared on the boy's face. He did not open his eyes, but a strange black light shone out from the gaps between his eyes. Yes, the man's eyes instantly became lifeless. He lowered his head and spoke respectfully. There was not a hint of emotion in his voice. It was as if he was a dead man speaking. The moment he lowered his head, a maggot crawled out of his four split lips and fell to the ground. This man, his body was filled with maggots. He was a dead man. Peony River had a blackout this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I hate the Electricity Bureau so much. It's not just one house that had a blackout, it's half the city. Half the city had a blackout. Today's and Monday's articles were all written in internet cafes. It was noisy. When I thought about how it would be the same on Friday, I felt even more pained. It was especially so when everyone in the internet cafes was chatting, playing games, being gay, picking up girls, and so on. I was the only one writing. Occasionally, there would be curious people who would come over to take a few glances. Please give me some recommendation votes to comfort me. I hope that these bitter days will end soon and that the great electrical industry will stop their maintenance. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 347. On the afternoon of the 5th day after Su Ming left Frozen Sky, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The clouds spread out like scales, and the sun was bright and beautiful. When it shone on the ground, it looked as if it had fused with the wind, causing the grass on the ground to rustle. Wu Duo charged forward at an incredibly fast speed, turning into a long arc as he charged forward. Su Ming was by his side, his robes fluttering in the wind. He looked calm, and no one could tell what was going on in his mind. He did not follow behind Wu Duo. After all, the two of them had just gotten to know each other, and the process of them getting to know each other was not friendly. That was why there was no need for him to do anything that would cause misunderstandings. That was why while the distance between Su Ming and Wu Duo did not seem too far when they lifted their heads to look at the ground, in truth, there was nearly 1,000 feet between them. As they charged forward, Wu Duo would occasionally slow down to observe Su Ming. But no matter how much he observed him, he could not find any clues about Su Ming. He could not see through Su Ming's origins. So he turned his attention to the fire ape that was also charging forward beside Su Ming. That MO doesn't look old, but he's very experienced. His words are also sharp. It's clear that he's definitely not someone who just walked out of his clan or tribe. He's also very independent and has a strong sense of goal. If I hadn't tempted him with rewards, he wouldn't have agreed to travel with me. By the looks of it, he's not completely flawless. This person must be very greedy for benefits. The ape was a strange species, and it was not something that Wu Duo could understand. The more he looked at Su Ming, the more mysterious he found him. It was not as if Wu Duo did not have any viciousness in his heart, but that viciousness was slowly being reduced by more than half due to his hesitation and Su Ming's mysteriousness. Su Ming saw all of Wu Duo's actions. He might not know what Wu Duo was thinking, but he could still make some guesses. It might not be a complete guess, but Su Ming knew that as long as he continued remaining silent, Wu Duo would not dare to act recklessly. This was something he could tell from the fact that Wu Duo had been following him all this while, but did not attack. This person is paranoid. Perhaps this is his strength, but it's also his weakness. If a paranoid person isn't confident, they won't attack easily. Su Ming averted his gaze from Wu Duo and calmly turned into a long arc that sliced through the sky with him. The two of them had their own thoughts as they charged forward. Time trickled by slowly. When noon passed, Wu Duo suddenly came to a halt, and Su Ming also stopped 1,000 feet behind them. "Brother Mo, there are shamans in front of us." Wu Duo closed his eyes as if he was using a special method to examine the situation. After a while, he opened his eyes and spoke with a serious expression. In truth, he was putting on an act. He did not know where the shamans were in the area, but he knew that the shamans he had made an agreement with were at a place where they would trade with each other. He obtained the magic crystals and provided the method to disguise his identity and transform into a barbarian. That was the original plan, but once he met Su Ming, Wu Duo changed his mind about this plan. He didn't want to provide a way to disguise his real identity, but he also wanted magic crystals. Based on my senses, there's only one person before us. The ripples from his power aren't strong, so he should be a fledgling battle shaman. It won't be hard for me to kill him. To show my sincerity, you can just watch by the side. I'll deal with him alone. Wu Duo looked at Su Ming, and a smile appeared on his face, but there was a freezing glare in his eyes. That freezing glare was clearly not directed at Su Ming. When Su Ming heard it, he nodded his head. He was still skeptical of Wu Duo's divine ability to search for shamans. A freezing glare shone in Wu Duo's eyes, and he took a swift step forward, charging towards the end of the plains before him. He was so quick that in the blink of an eye, he was already 1,000 feet away, and like a shooting star, he was getting closer. Su Ming followed behind him. His gaze was like lightning as he stared at the spot where Wu Duo was going. As Wu Duo got closer, the instant he landed on the ground, a person suddenly stood up from the plains. That person was incredibly tall and had a leather helmet made of cow horns on his head. A ghastly presence surrounded his body, and, as he stood up, it was as if there was a huge gust of wind sweeping up from the ground, causing the grass around him to continuously sway. There was a tattoo on the man's face, but that tattoo was rather indistinct and dull. It cannot be seen clearly. The only thing that could be seen clearly was that there was a vertical crack on the man's lips, causing his lips to look as if they had been split into four, causing all those who saw it to be terrified. At the instant the man saw Wu Duo charging towards him, a brilliant light shone in his dull eyes, and he grinned. However, before his lips cracked open, there was a terrifying feeling to them. In fact, there were even a few fat maggots crawling out of his mouth as he smiled. The maggots fell out of his mouth in a twisted manner. Wu Duo was originally incredibly fast, but the moment he got closer and saw the man's lips and the maggots within, his expression changed abruptly. Just as he was about to retreat, the man lifted his head and let out a low growl towards the sky. That growl was filled with ruthlessness, and as he roared, the man leaped forward and spread his arms wide open, charging towards Wu Duo to hug him. Su Ming watched this scene unwaveringly from midair. The moment he saw the man, his pupils shrank. In Su Ming's eyes, there was a thick aura of death surrounding the man's entire body, but not a single hint of that aura of death had leaked out before the man appeared. It was clear that it was hidden within his body. But that was not all. Su Ming could sense a feeling akin to the living dead from the man's body. It was as if he was the ingredient he needed to create spirit plunder. He might not have known why the man was in such a state, but Su Ming was certain that he was definitely not mistaken about the ingredient he needed to create spirit plunder. The only difference might be that the aura of death takes up most of the ingredients needed to create spirit plunder. It suppresses the weak life force within the body, causing the person to be unable to move, but the person will remain. It's as if the life force is within the body, and the aura of death is outside. But this person's aura of death has fused with his life force, and he has achieved some sort of strange balance. It's as if the aura of death is within the body, and the life force is outside. Because of that, this person can move his body, and he is in a state where he is half dead and half alive. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He stared at the man in midair. An interested look appeared on his face. It was the exact opposite of Su Ming. Wu Duo was charging forward, but the man pouncing on him was laughing ferociously, and he became even faster, closing in on him like a wall. With Wu Duo's level of cultivation, he should not have had such a reaction when he saw the man. What caused his expression to change drastically at that moment was because he knew the man's current condition. That condition was known to the shaman tribe as undying and imperishable, and only those who had reached Soul Catcher realm in the shaman tribe could do this. Wu Duo had killed Soul Catchers before, and he had a deep understanding of just how terrifying those in this realm were. As he retreated, he swept his gaze across the ground, trying to find the hidden Soul Catcher. At the same time, the moment the man closed in on him with a ferocious smile, a freezing glare appeared in Wu Duo's eyes. As he retreated, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the sky. With that one seize, cracking sounds came from the air above Wu Duo, and a gigantic dark blue ice mountain appeared out of nowhere. As Wu Duo swung his arm, that ice mountain charged towards the man with a howl. The two sides collided in an instant, and a deafening boom reverberated in the air. The burly man's body trembled, and the ice mountain before him shattered inch by inch. The shattering was not caused by him, but by Wu Duo's divine ability. As the ice mountain shattered, it turned into countless sharp blades that pierced through the burly man's body, slicing his arms, legs, head, and body into several pieces. No blood flowed out. Only a large amount of maggots shot out in all directions in midair. Wu Duo, how have you been? At that moment, a ghastly and piercing voice traveled forth from the ground. The instant that voice reverberated in the air, a dark light shone in the eyes of the man's head, which had been split into several pieces. Each of his torn limbs shone with a dark light, and as they scattered, they gathered together as if there was a suction force within them, turning into the man's body once again. However, there were many long cracks on his body, as if he was a rag doll that had been torn to shreds and then stitched back together by someone. It was inevitable that there would be signs of stitching on his body. The man grinned, and his smile was ferocious. He moved, but this time he did not charge towards the grave-looking Wu Duo. Instead, he turned into a long arc filled with the aura of death and charged towards Su Ming. Clearly, he had received a new order. Yaku. The instant Wu Duo heard that piercing voice, his expression became even more grave. At that moment, 3 dark blue ice mountains suddenly appeared around his body once again. They surrounded his body and let out waves of freezing air under the sunlight. A large amount of grass on the ground suddenly withered, and as it withered, a boy walked out from within. That boy had his eyes closed and his hands placed behind his back. There was a ghastly smile on his lips. Without any hesitation, Wu Duo lifted his right hand and pointed downwards. Immediately, the three ice mountains let out a loud rumble and charged towards the ground, turning into a mighty pressure that caused muffled rumbling sounds to rise from the ground. The boy laughed coldly. He did not dodge, but instead lifted his right hand and pushed forward. Immediately, black light shone fiercely on his right palm. That black light instantly spread out and turned into an oval-shaped door of light before the boy. A low roar came from within the door of light. Immediately after, a withered foot stepped out from within. The skin on that horn was withered, and there were many dark bloodstains on it. At the same time, what appeared after that foot was a withered and emaciated person who was more than 3 meters tall. That person looked like a skeleton at first glance, but there was a dark glint in his eyes. Once he appeared, he let out a roar and charged towards the 3 ice mountains. Almost the moment the boy cast the unique shaman art that belonged to the soul catchers, the crack man in the sky charged towards Su Ming with a ferocious expression. He was incredibly quick, stirring up a thick aura of death. That aura of death howled behind him as if it wanted to cover the sky and earth. It closed in on Su Ming. Su Ming stared at the incoming man with a strange glint in his eyes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 348. I wonder if I can use this to create spirit plunder. This thought appeared in Su Ming's head. He was incredibly interested in this item that could not die and could not be destroyed. Almost the instant the man closed in on him, Su Ming charged backwards. The man instantly gave chase, and in the blink of an eye, the two of them were already far away from Wu Duo and the boy's battlefield. Wu Duo saw Su Ming leaving, but he was powerless to stop him. As for the boy, he might have his eyes closed, but he still noticed Su Ming. However, he did not pay any attention to Su Ming. To him, Wu Duo was his target. Su Ming retreated at a moderate pace, luring the undying and indestructible man to chase after him. Once there was some distance between him and Wu Duo, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Green light shone at the center of his brows, and the small virescent sword charged out with a howl towards the man at an extreme speed. The man did not even have time to dodge. The sword immediately pierced through the center of his brows, but there was still no blood. The man only staggered a little. A fierce glint appeared in his eyes, but he was not too affected. With a low growl, he pounced on Su Ming. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. The instant the man pounced on him, he naturally took a step to the side. He was so quick that he left behind an afterimage, causing the man to instantly miss his target. He turned around swiftly and roared at Su Ming. This unique material doesn't make him very agile. He can move quickly in a straight line, but he's much weaker when it comes to dodging and changing directions, Su Ming mumbled. Su Ming mumbled and lifted his right hand. Green light tumbled backwards and turned into a small sword in his hand. Su Ming held the sword between his fingers and charged towards the man. The man pounced on him once again as he roared. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The instant he came into contact with the man, he sliced through the man's right arm with 2 fingers. He appeared behind the man and sliced through his right arm again. In the blink of an eye, he took a step forward, and when the man turned around with a low growl, Su Ming appeared behind him again. With a swing of the small sword in his hand, he cut through the man's right leg at the base, then did not stop. He cut off the man's left leg as well. Once Su Ming finished doing all this, he took a few steps back in a relaxed manner and looked at the man with his back turned towards him. He saw that the instant the man turned around, his arms and legs were immediately separated from his body. Yet immediately after, a strange scene appeared once again. The man's limbs that had been cut off by Su Ming shone with a dark light, and they instantly reconnected with his body. A large amount of yellow liquid flowed out of the man's mouth, and he pounced on Su Ming once again. As he pounced on him, Su Ming moved back. A strange light shone in his eyes, and he swiftly spread his divine sense outwards to envelop the man's body. Within his divine sense, he could clearly see that there was an abundant life force within the man's body, and it was this life force that allowed this person's body to gather together endlessly. Could this vitality be the secret of the soul devourer? It seems like the spirit plunder powder has a miraculous effect on this person. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and he continued retreating. As he continued observing the man, he lifted the sword in his right hand and swung it down. Immediately, a crack appeared on the pouncing man's chest, as if he had been flung vertically away. A foul stench came crashing into Su Ming's nostrils, but he was empty. There were no organs in his body. There was only a wisp of gray aura that only Su Ming could faintly see with his divine sense. That aura was growing from various parts of the man's body. It's a pity that while this person's aura of death is thick, it's very easy for it to become chaotic. If it wasn't for this strange life force supporting him, he would have broken down a long time ago. It's clear that he was just created, or else if I ran into someone with a stable aura of death, then perhaps I could use him to create spirit plunder. Su Ming shook his head and lost interest in the man. The instant the man pounced on him once again, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and an item appeared in his hand. That item was a pearl. It was naturally Su Ming's spirit plunder. With a calm gaze, he threw spirit plunder at the man. The moment spirit plunder flew out, a dazed look appeared in the man's eyes, but soon, that dazed look turned into emptiness. He stopped moving forward and stared at the floating spirit plunder before him with a dumbfounded expression. Waves of gray aura spread out from his mouth, nose, ears, and all parts of his body, and with a shocking speed, it rushed into spirit plunder. All of this happened in the span of a few breaths. After that, the man started trembling and his body gradually fell apart. His limbs fell off and his body shattered. After a moment, he turned into a large amount of minced meat that fell to the ground. Spirit plunder had clearly become slightly different after it absorbed a large amount of gray aura. It was murky inside, but there was an abundance of life force surrounding it. Once Su Ming summoned it back, he held it in his hand and cast a few glances at it. This strange life force must be the secret of the soul catchers and other shamans. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence. He heard muffled booms coming from the distance. It was clear that the battle between Wu Duo and the boy had reached an incredibly dangerous stage. Once Su Ming put away spirit plunder, he walked forward. The fire ape continued following by his side. As it watched everything, impatience appeared on its face, and it would occasionally bring down the battle axe on its shoulders and bare its teeth at Su Ming. When it saw Su Ming walking towards the battlefield, the fire ape quickly followed behind him. Before long, when Su Ming returned to where Wu Duo was, he narrowed his eyes. There were 9 gigantic blocks of ice on the ground, and within each of them was a thin corpse sealed in ice. The corpse was still in the position it was in before it was sealed. The boy's body floated in the sky. There were 3 wisps of black mist surrounding him, and they turned into 3 figures that looked like malicious spirits that were fighting against Wu Duo. Wu Duo looked a little disheveled. He was wearing a long robe made of beast skins, and in his hand was a staff made of bones made of snakes. In his right hand was a dagger, and as he swung the dagger, it looked as if it could cut through space itself. Behind him was an illusionary black tower. Half of the tower was surrounded by fog and looked rather indistinct. There were also low growls coming from within the tower that shook the entire area, causing all those who heard it to feel their hearts tremble. Su Ming's arrival made delight appear on Wu Duo's face. He originally thought that Su Ming had already escaped, but when he saw him, Wu Duo quickly called out loudly, "Brother Amo, help me kill this person. His head is more valuable than the others." Almost the moment Wu Duo spoke, the boy let out a cold harumph, and one of the 3 wisps of black mist spreading out from his body instantly split off and charged toward Su Ming. It turned into a malicious spirit 1,000 feet before Su Ming, roaring as it tried to devour him. Before Su Ming could even attack, the fire ape beside him let out a roar as it looked at the battle axe and rushed out. Su Ming undid the chains, causing the fire ape to be temporarily free. It dragged the chains and closed in on the malicious spirit in the blink of an eye to fight against it. The boy in the distance frowned, but before he could do anything, Su Ming lifted his right foot and took a step forward. The moment his foot landed, the air around Su Ming instantly started distorting. The moment those ripples appeared, his speed instantly reached an indescribable state, and he disappeared. His speed was so quick that not only did Wu Duo not expect it, the boy also did not expect it. He only felt the presence of the berserker he had locked on to suddenly disappear, and when it reappeared, he was already right before him. When Su Ming reappeared, he was less than 10 feet away from the boy. He swung the small virescent sword in his right hand and cut down on the boy's neck. Then, with that indescribable speed, he sliced through the boy. The entire process was over in the blink of an eye. When Su Ming reappeared, he had already returned to his original spot, as if he had not rushed out at all. He stood there and looked at the boy in the distance coldly. Blood gushed out of the boy's neck, and his head was flung into the air. The black mist around his body instantly disintegrated. It did not matter whether it was the two wisps of black mist that were fighting against Wu Duo or the wisp that was fighting against the fire ape. All of them disappeared without a trace. Wu Duo was stunned. He sucked in a sharp breath and looked at Su Ming as if this was the first time he got to know him. Most of the vicious thoughts that had been lingering in his heart instantly disappeared. Su Ming cast Wu Duo a calm look. Besides killing the boy, he had also attacked to intimidate Wu Duo. If he wanted to take down the deal, then the two of them had to decide who would be the primary and who would be the secondary. This time, Su Ming did not want to. That was why he could only be the primary. Brother Amo. When Su Ming looked at Wu Duo, he forced out a smile. He was just about to speak when his expression suddenly changed drastically. It's not over yet. A piercing roar suddenly spread out from all directions and turned into numerous voices that traveled into the air at the same time. The boy's head that had been cut down by Su Ming's sword and thrown into the air did not fall to the ground like his body. Instead, it floated in midair, and its eyes were still closed. That piercing voice had come from the boy's mouth. As his words traveled through the air, the boy's eyes flew open. The instant he did so, Wu Duo's voice traveled swiftly into the air. Don't look into his eyes. That pair of eyes had no pupils, and they were not white either. Instead, they looked like empty holes and were pitch black. It was as if there was a power within those eyes that could suck in everything around them. Those were the eyes of the Candle Dragon, the legendary sacred beast of the Shaman tribe. It was said that among the 6 different realms in the Shaman tribe, the power of soul catchers came from the Candle Dragon. When Su Ming saw those eyes, his vision became clouded. The world before him seemed to have shattered, as if he had fallen into a state of chaos. His mind was blank. The voices by his ears gradually faded into the distance. There were the fire ape's roars, the boy's sinister laughter, muffled rumbles, and Wu Duo's warning. It was as if all of these things were slowly getting further away from Su Ming's ears, until they were about to completely disappear. Yet at that instant, the mysterious black stone fragment on Su Ming's chest, the strange item that had been hanging around his neck, let out a cooling sensation that spread through Su Ming's body. At the same time, in the midst of his daze, Su Ming heard a voice that was getting closer and closer to him from the distance. Big brother, big brother. Su Ming shuddered. It'll explode this week, latest by Sunday. I've made up my mind tomorrow. I won't go to the internet cafe anymore. I'll get a room in a hotel. It's quiet there. Ahem. Are there any fellow Taoists in Peony River? I'm welcome to join us. Lastly, please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 349. Su Ming had almost forgotten about that voice. In his memories, that voice had not appeared for a long, long time. Yet at that moment, as that voice appeared, Su Ming's body was not the only one that trembled. His soul also trembled. That voice came from the distance, then from the distance to the distance. As it drifted about, it was similar to the voice he had heard all those years ago, but there were also differences. That difference was the anxiety in that voice. That anxiety made it sound as if it was about to cry. Big brother, it's almost too late. Big brother, wake up, wake up. Big brother, he's stopping me. Big brother. Su Ming opened his eyes swiftly. Cold sweat broke out all over his body. The moment he opened his eyes, all the sounds by his ears returned to normal. The fire ape's roars, Wu Duo's words, and the boy's sinister laughter. The world in front of his eyes rapidly recovered from its fragmented state. As the voice entered his ears, the first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was the fire ape rapidly retreating in front of him. In front of the fire ape's two-handed battle axe was an illusory. It was a head with a human's face and a snake's body. That head was crimson red and about 100 feet in size. It had a gaping mouth, and within that mouth was a ball of fire that looked like it was burning. Its body was an illusion, but it still made the fire ape roar as it continuously retreated. The fiery red fur on the fire ape's body dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Quite a bit of it even fell off, as if it could not endure it any longer. The axe in its hand that was blocking the human-faced snake beast melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. Wu Duo was also facing a human-faced snake's head at that moment. There was a grave look on his face. Countless layers of ice covered his entire body, and they turned into a gust of wind. As the wind howled, Wu Duo lifted his right hand and formed a strange seal as he stood in the freezing wind. The instant he formed the seal, all the hair on his right hand fell off at the same time. Human emitting earth element. Wu Duo let out a low growl, and the entire ground trembled. The grass on the endless land under his feet was instantly swept away by the wind, and a gigantic ring appeared on the ground. As waves of blue light shone, an invisible force swiftly erupted from the ground. The area of that power when it first appeared was incredibly large, but as it rose into the air, it swiftly shrank. In the end, it was only 100 feet wide, and it was completely blue. From the distance, it looked as if a blue pillar of light had erupted from the ground and pierced through the human-faced snake head in front of him. The moment the head of the strange beast was destroyed, the boy's head let out a shrill scream and rapidly withered. All of this happened in an instant. It was the first thing Su Ming saw when he opened his eyes. When he saw that the fire ape could no longer withstand the pain, Su Ming knew that the bracelet his eldest senior brother had given him would only protect him and not the fire ape. As for He-Feng, he seemed to hate the fire ape. Besides, Su Ming was not in any danger, so he had enough reasons not to attack. Without any hesitation, Su Ming took a step forward. The moment his foot landed, he appeared right before the fire ape. He knocked his body backwards, and a gentle force pushed the fire ape back. The head of the strange beast roared and charged towards Su Ming. Killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had once again gained a deeper understanding of the strangeness of the shaman tribe's divine abilities. Almost the instant the strange beast pounced on him, Su Ming lifted his right hand and drew a line in the direction of the beast. That line was Su Ming's serendipity. It had a beautiful name, Berserker Obliteration. The moment Berserker Obliteration appeared, it was as if the head with a human's face and a snake's body had turned into a drawing on a piece of paper. Su Ming's one line swept past, and the beast was split apart on the drawing paper. With that one line, the weather changed and the wind and clouds tumbled backwards. The strange beast before Su Ming trembled viciously and let out a shrill roar. The moment its head touched Su Ming, it was split into two before Su Ming. The two have charged past Su Ming and turned into a red wisp of smoke that disappeared without a trace. Almost the instant the snake with a human's face died, Su Ming's pupils shrank. He noticed that even though the beast had disappeared, there was still a wisp of red smoke that charged into his body at an incredible speed and crawled into the Han Mountain Bell Su Ming had refined in his body. It was then swallowed by the strange rod snake in the bell, and joy and excitement appeared on its face. A thought appeared in Su Ming's heart, but this was not the time for him to be thinking about it. The moment the strange beast died, the boy's head in the sky let out another scream of pain. The speed at which it withered away became even faster, and black blood flowed out of its eyes. His eyes had already been destroyed by Su Ming and Wu Duo using different methods. As the boy's head screamed in pain, he swiftly retreated. At the same time, his body that had fallen to the ground stood up swiftly and charged into the sky, as if he wanted to touch the head and fuse together once again. 12 undying ancestral shamans, the power of the Candle Nine, 3 cycles of 60 years, scatter. As the boy retreated and closed in on the boy's body, these words tumbled out of his mouth. 3 cycles of 60 years? I was wondering why you were so strong. So you're just a fledgling shaman at the peak of the peak, and you've suppressed 3 cycles of 60 years in preparation to become a medial soul catcher. He even turned himself into a puppet and obtained the art of undying and indestructible. This is a forbidden art that is not allowed among the soul catchers of the shaman tribe. Wu Duo moved by the boy's side and lifted his right hand. Immediately, freezing air spread out from his palm and turned into an endless amount of ice that surrounded his body. As cracking sounds reverberated in the air, the ice spread out rapidly and charged towards the boy's head. As the ice spread out, Wu Duo lifted his head and roared towards the sky. A large amount of the hair on his body fell off at the same time, and even his eyebrows became much looser. As the hair on his body fell off, the layer of ice that was spreading towards the boy instantly swelled up by more than 10 times its original size. Its speed also increased abruptly, and the instant the boy's head fused together with his body and the dark light shone, as if they were glued together, the layer of ice caught up to him. As booming sounds shook the sky, the boy's body was instantly covered by layers of ice, and he turned into an ice sculpture that floated in midair. Brother Emo, this freezing art of mine can only seal him for a short period of time. Once his body fuses together once again, with the fact that he has scattered the power of 3 cycles of 60 years, and even gave up on trying to become a medial shaman, along with his undying and indestructible body, it'll be very difficult for us to kill him. If we're the slightest bit careless, we'll definitely be heavily injured. Even if we kill him, we'll still lose more than we gain. Why don't we leave now and search for other shamans to kill? It'll be much easier, and our efficiency will also be much higher. The thought of retreating appeared in Wu Duo's mind. He knew that if he did not pay a certain price for the soul catchers in the shaman tribe, it would be very difficult to kill them. To him, it was not worth it. As Wu Duo spoke, cracking sounds rang out, and the ice sealing the boy instantly cracked. The boy within lifted his head slowly, and a gray glare appeared in his strangely enchanting eyes. He stared at Su Ming and Wu Duo with a venomous look on his face, as if he wanted to remember these 2 people. Let's go. Wu Duo frowned and was just about to retreat, but Su Ming did not move. He stared at the boy within the ice, and killing intent appeared in his eyes. The fire ape's fur was dull behind Su Ming, and its face was a little dispirited. This was something Su Ming could not accept. Wait, Su Ming said unhurriedly. He remembered the scene of the man dying to spirit plunder, and he quickly brought out 3 spirit plunder from his bosom with his right hand. He flung them forward, and the 3 spirit plunder charged towards the ice, sealing the boy. The 3 spirit plunder let out a piercing sound as they charged forward, and in an instant they arrived around the ice and crashed into the ice that contained the boy. The moment the spirit plunder appeared, Wu Duo's pupils shrank, and even his breathing quickened. He stared at the 3 spirit plunder, and disbelief appeared on his face. The expression of the boy in the ice also changed greatly. He opened his mouth as if he had lost his voice, but no sound came out. However, from the change in his expression and the trace of fear in his eyes, it could be determined that he definitely recognized the spirit plunder powder. Moreover, he seemed to be afraid of it. This was something Su Ming had deduced based on how spirit plunder could kill the man. As he tested the waters, he lifted his right hand and pointed forward. Immediately, the three spirit plunder shone with a powerful dark light. That dark light instantly seeped through the ice and charged towards the boy within. The boy struggled violently, and as he struggled, more cracks appeared on the ice. Muffled rumbling sounds reverberated in the air, and quite a number of the cracks connected with each other, causing the ice to shatter and crumble. The boy struggled furiously, but the black mist from the three spirit plunder that reached the ice was even faster. In an instant, it crashed into the boy and crawled into his body. The boy's face contorted, and he let out a pained scream. His body trembled, and a large amount of gray mist crawled out of his body uncontrollably and charged towards the three spirit plunder. The boy seemed to be in incredible pain. His body shuddered, and the ice around him finally could no longer withstand the force. Most of it exploded, causing only a small part of the boy's body to remain within the ice. There was no longer any ice in front of him, but the three spirit plunder floated there, unmoving, causing the boy to let out pained screams. He struggled furiously, but by the looks of it, the boy's body seemed to have been restrained. Despair appeared on his face, along with disbelief and disbelief. It was as if the fact that Su Ming could bring out spirit plunder had shocked him to the core. Soul Catcher Pearl. The Soul Catcher Pearl that can only be refined by shamans. The instant the boy's voice reverberated in the air, accompanied by a shrill and hoarse voice, Su Ming took a step forward. There was a chilling look in his eyes. The instant he closed in on the boy, green light shone in his hand, and the small virescent sword sliced through the boy's chest, causing a gash to appear on the boy's chest. At the same time, in the distance, Wu Duo's face turned pale. Confusion appeared on his face, and at that moment, he saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. It was a scene where he could no longer harbor any malicious thoughts towards Su Ming. He saw that the person called Mo Su had a gloomy expression on his face. After cutting open the chest of the boy, whose body was frozen and could only struggle but could not move, Mo Su actually took out a large handful of medicinal herbs from his bosom. He picked out a few stalks and directly stuffed them into the boy's wound. Looking at his skilled movements, it seemed that he had done this more than once. What is he doing? Wu Duo's heart pounded against his chest as he watched Su Ming continuously placing the herbs into the boy's wound. The moment the herbs entered the wound, they would immediately grow in an enchanting manner. In fact, in just a short moment, Mo Su brought out a few bones with herbs growing on them and placed them into the wound. The boy was also terrified. He saw Su Ming doing all of this without any expression on his face, and despair that was filled with extreme terror appeared on his face. What are you doing? The boy's voice was trembling. Creating medicine, Su Ming answered coldly. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.